Entertaining, informative, and educational. Inspiring content that makes a difference.
This is the Maximus Troy Publications Broadcasting Network.
Join the Academy. The Breeders' Academy proudly presents Bred to Perfection with Kenny Troiano, a show for serious breeders.
Whether you are looking to create a new strain or simply improve an old one, you have come to the right place.
Daddy, I want more chicken.
Oh, boy.
Now, here's your host, Kenny Troiano.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Bred to Perfection. My name is Kenny Troiano, and this, my friends, is the podcast devoted to helping you become a better breeder and taking your strain to the next level. That's right, my friends. It doesn't matter if you are brand new to breeding or you've been breeding for many years. There is something all of us can do to improve our fowl for future generations.
Dad, just because I collect the eggs doesn't mean I have to eat them.
Okay, welcome to another episode of Bred to Perfection. I'm Kenny Troiano, and I'm here with my co-host Frank Bradley, and we're also with our special guest, Dr. Rodrigo Gallardo. He's a poultry veterinarian from UC Davis. How you guys doing? Good to see you.
Hey, Doc.
Doing good. How are you guys?
Doing good.
Yeah, this is going to be a really cool or really interesting talk because I think a lot of us, we understand the importance and the benefits of antibiotics and what it can do. In some ways, it can be a miracle drug, but some people tend to use it for the wrong reasons. So we're going to dive into the misuse and abuse of antibiotics and vaccinations and the consequences that we might see by doing this. Dr. Gallardo, do you want to talk about your program first before we get into it?
Yes. Well, thanks for the opportunity for being here. We started a couple of years ago with the Game Fowl Wellness Program, which is a program in Southern California that teaches people or helps people that raises game fowl in order to prevent diseases. And also we provide information in terms of vaccination, antibiotic use, and all that good stuff that we like using, but sometimes we don't know how to. So this program is funded by USDA, particularly in order to prevent Newcastle disease virus, which is, as you guys know, highly contagious. And unfortunately, being a foreign animal disease, whenever it shows up here in the US, the only way of getting out of it is by euthanasia of the birds. So if we don't go to euthanasia, I mean, that's great, but we need to prevent for it. And that's why this program exists.
Cool. How's it doing so far?
Good. So we have close to 100 people enrolled, which is, I think, a very good number. We're still, more than recruiting, we're now trying to provide the information. We have online seminars. We're also visiting people in order to sample their flocks and see what level of antibodies we have against Newcastle disease virus. Try to teach on how to apply the vaccine, which sometimes is tricky, and then provide insights in terms of disease prevention. That's what we've been doing. And so far, it's been a good experience.
Yeah, because when we were first promoting it, you had 30 members or so and struggling just a little bit, but now you guys are doing pretty good.
We were in the middle of COVID, you remember?
Yeah, that's true too.
It was pretty difficult. We set up meetings with people and sometimes nobody showed. But now, I mean, I think it's growing. We increased our team. We're 2 veterinarians now. Dr. Theodore Dirksen works in Southern California, myself, and then Alejandra, who is our administrator, but she's also studying veterinary medicine. So we'll have 3 veterinarians on staff. And then we have the help of several technicians that help us going to the premises and sampling birds. We're also starting something that probably will be good for some people, which is some sort of telemedicine. Like whenever I'm not there, right, because I live in Northern California, we can communicate through an iPad and clarify certain questions or solve issues.
So let's get into the topic. My experience is that this was quite a few years ago, was it seemed like I was running a hospital. I had so many sick birds. I had every medication on my shelf you could think of. It seemed like I was always pumping them with antibiotics or doing something with them, trying to cure them. And it never seemed to really fix them. They seemed to be chronic. It would seem to fix them for a short period and get back, or some of them would never come right. And it wasn't until my mentor came over and he said, Kenny, you can't raise chickens like this. This is not the way to create a strain. You're actually creating weak chickens, and you're never going to get ahead of this game. You need to start culling and getting rid of those and start bringing to the healthy ones. And he went into my tack shed and basically threw every one of those medications into the trash in a way that broke them. And my first thought was, I was just thinking of the cost of having to replace them. And he just said, get rid of these medications, just breed them, cull the ones that are sick, and in time it'll get better. I wasn't even sure I was going in the right direction at first, because it seemed like at first half of them were sick. I had to cull. It seemed like I was culling more than I was keeping. And then each year it got better and better, to the point when now I don't have any sick chickens whatsoever. And I don't medicate, I don't worm them, I don't do anything. And I rarely have a sick chicken. When I do, I cull it. And it just seemed like, to me, the best way to go. What do you think of that kind of practice?
Well, like in humans, right? I mean, whenever you're taking too many meds, it's because something's not doing right. So in my experience, and I'll be really honest with you, I've practiced veterinary medicine for close to 20 years, a little bit more. And the reality, and I used to work with commercial birds, and somebody might think like, well, commercial birds, all these antibiotics, all these hormones and stuff, it's not such. I probably use antibiotics or prescribe antibiotics maybe 5 times, maybe 6 times in my life. And I'll tell you why. So the way in which we raise chickens, and the successful way in which you raise chickens or game fowl or birds in general, is through prevention. Birds, when they get sick, because of their physiology, usually they die. And the reason is because, they don't have the same respiratory tract that we have. I mean, they have the same pipe, they have the same lungs, but they have air sacs. And those air sacs perpetuate respiratory infections at the point in which it's really difficult to treat an ill bird. Whenever they start showing signs, usually you're, going down in terms of the curve of health. That's why we focus a lot on prevention. And part of that prevention is biosecurity. And I know biosecurity is that word in which, I usually talk about it and people shuts down and they say like, oh, again, they're going to talk about, the disinfectant and cleaning and disinfection and the management. But that's the only proved way that I know that it acts against all the pathogens. So it's cross-protective, right? You don't do it with birds that are sick, and actually prevents diseases. So it's as simple as keeping your flock closed, right, from visitors or from other birds, in order to keep a certain level or status of health that it's important. So the first thing would be to deal with biosecurity and management in a good way, as simple as having a closed flock, and also making sure you're doing things right. You're feeding your birds adequately. You're giving them the vaccines that are necessary, right? You don't have to give vaccines that you don't need if you don't have challenges against certain pathogens. I see in the game fowl world a lot of mycoplasma vaccination, for example, where sometimes it's not needed, right? I see a lot of infectious bronchitis vaccination. If you don't have a challenge from infectious bronchitis, the only thing that vaccine will be doing is more harm, because it's a live virus. So we can talk about that later, but vaccines are not considered antibiotics. They are live products or live pathogens that we use in order to show them how the pathogen looks like, and then they will create immunity against it, right? And then in terms of management, clean water, clean feed, good nutrition, sometimes digging into the nutrition that you can provide to your birds. Sometimes grains don't give everything that these birds need, and they actually need a vitamin pack, a mineral pack that doesn't come with mixed grains, right? So all those things make a bird strong in order to be able to respond and in front of a pathogen coming into the flock. Now, as a veterinarian, I can tell you that we do need drugs. We do need antibiotics. That's part of our toolbox. And unfortunately, with the indiscriminate use of these antibiotics, we have less and less in the shelf. So I can tell you that for my practice right now, I only have 4 antibiotics that I can use. From a past, we did have many more. And the reason is that these antibiotics have been indiscriminately used, and there's generation of resistance. So this is a topic that is really controversial. I can understand how people likes using them, because some of them work really well. But at the same time, you do a pact with the devil, in terms of using them and not doing things right in terms of management and biosecurity.
Yeah, I hope we touch on biosecurity a lot because I think it's that important. I was one of the happiest persons when they turned it to script, when they made you get a prescription for some of these antibiotics because of the way they use them. We'll talk about that in a second. But they're still getting them. I don't know if they're coming from Mexico or something, but they're still getting some of these antibiotics that they shouldn't be getting a hold of. Baytril being one of them,
Yeah, it was like more than 6 months ago, maybe a year ago, that I was doing my rounds because of the program in Southern California. And I went to a feed store, and of the feed stores sat with me, and we had a long chat about antibiotics. And he basically told me, "You're killing 60% of my business."
Wow.
And I said, well, there's a reason why this is happening. And I talked with him really openly about the reasons. And the guy understood, right? When you touch somebody's pocket, there's harm. But at the same time, if you explain and you do outreach, right, which is part of what the university does, you can give reasons on why this is important. So from my rounds down there, I see a lot of products coming with labels in Spanish. I see a lot of products, they don't have the certification that we need them to have here in the US, and that's concerning. On the other hand, there's certain products that are bad for humans. So there's certain antibiotics that has been banned here in the US for use in livestock, such as Baytril, for example.
Yeah.
We cannot use Baytril in livestock or birds in this case, from which we consume their meat or we consume their eggs. There's a real health issue behind that, and people doesn't really pay attention to that, and they just keep feeding them to their chickens, even if they are chickens that are providing eggs. So there's a food safety risk there too. I'm a firm believer that we as veterinarians need to get out and explain the population on what are the reasons on why we cannot use antibiotics indiscriminately. But unfortunately, there's not many like me, right? I mean, there's a lot of people that stay in their office behind the computer doing data work.
And that's the problem if they are using it indiscriminately.
Yeah.
And I don't think you know it to the level that they may be doing that actually, because they're using antibiotics as a crutch. They're giving it, I've heard things like a storm's coming, so I'm going to go give my birds antibiotics to protect them. I've heard, and Frank brings this up a lot too, and he probably hears it more than I do, is they're giving baby chicks. Now, let me know if I'm wrong. I have a book that's very popular for game fowl and chicken owners. They even promote it, is giving baby chicks right out of the shell antibiotics.
Yeah. And that was a practice that was used in the industry not long ago. And what you do basically is you cover or you mask up your management issues. So if you give them gentamicin at day of age with the Marek's disease vaccine, that will basically cure any possible infection in the yolk sac, and it will reduce your mortality, your first week mortality from 5%, which could be in a poorly run breeder flock, up to less than 1%. Now, all these restrictions that are in place, and all the consumers' new regulations doesn't allow poultry producers in order to use them. So the hit that the poultry industry took with that was huge. Now here in California, at least, we don't use antibiotics at day of age, and the mortalities have gone up during the first week, but we've been able through management to reduce them up to the normal levels. So if you transfer that to small flocks, that tells you that you can do that. And actually in small flocks, you have much more control of the individual bird. So you could take out antibiotics and use only management and certain natural products that are available, right, in order to keep your birds healthy and not have the mortalities that you think you will have if you don't use them.
Let's talk about the way they use it, the actual practice of using antibiotics. And this is what I see almost all the time, is that they either have a chicken that they don't want to get sick, or they have a chicken that is sick. They take a half cc, pump it in the breast, and they think they're done. Yeah. They give a serious pulse shot, but there's no treatment.
And that's the worst way to use it, right? So if you grab a chicken in this case and you put half cc of antibiotic, the only thing that you're doing is controlling the pathogens at a certain moment. In order for an antibiotic to produce its job, you need to give it at the point in which you'll have a persistent concentration in the blood and in the tissues, in order for that antibiotic to be able to kill all the bacteria for a prolonged period of time until the time in which you don't have more bacteria, right? If you give one-time dose, what you're doing is killing the bacteria at that moment, and then the bacteria will start replicating or reproducing again, but you're selecting them. So the ones that didn't die with that shot will be stronger to the next shot,
Yep.
or will be stronger to the next time that those bugs will meet the antibacterial or the antibiotic.
Yeah.
So, of course, we go back to the same thing that I said before. We need more outreach. We need more people like you guys talking about these topics and basically explaining why antibiotics need to be used in a certain way. There's a science behind it. So we don't prescribe antibiotics for 3, 5, 7, or 10 days because we just wake up and we think that's the magic number that day. It's because of the severity of the infection. It's because of the pathogen that was detected. There's a lot of diagnosis that people in small flocks don't use, right? There's a lot of laboratories that provide services in terms of diagnosis of certain pathogens. They even tell you when they isolate the bacteria if the bacteria is sensitive or not to a certain antibiotic. So the decision of prescribing one or the other depends on the bacteria that was cultured in a laboratory and the antibiotic sensitivity that that bacteria showed. So it's not like we all have a clear eye and we look at the bird and we say like, oh, this is salmonella. We will use this antibiotic with this rhythm. No, right? Experience gives you a little bit of that, but usually you need to use a laboratory. So, for example, our program, if we see birds that are poor doers, we'll collect samples, we'll send them to the lab, we'll get results for these people, and we will interpret those results and we will prescribe whatever needs to be prescribed. We will never prescribe antibiotics before sending samples to a lab. At least here in California, there's a lot of laboratory system. The laboratory system is pretty big. There's at least 4 labs across the state. In other states in the East Coast, same thing. They are willing to receive samples from small flocks because that's one of the ways in which we do surveillance. We know what's going on in the small flocks in order to protect the big flocks, right? But we need to work on that. We need to tell people how to proceed in a good way in terms of disease for these flocks.
Yeah, I think you hit on something there is not only do they not understand the disease that they're dealing with, but they don't understand the right antibiotic because there's a lot of different products out there. So they could be actually hurting things rather than helping things.
And the other thing is also that antibiotics they're not preventers of disease. So you cannot use them before you have an infection. What you're doing there is just depopulating all the good bacteria that that animal has, and then leaving the door open to other bacteria that are bad so they can come and colonize that bird, and then those birds can get infected. That's the reason why after long antibiotic treatments in humans, you give them probiotics in order to populate the intestines in some cases, so those intestines don't get infected by Campylobacter, by Salmonella, by bad bacteria. The same happens with the respiratory tract. If we use tetracycline, which is probably the most used antibiotic in small flocks, they call it the yellow powder in some countries like Nicaragua, Central America, in which they raise a lot of game fowl. If you use it indiscriminately, that's what you will be doing. You will be just clearing all the good bacteria and leaving space for the coryzas, for the salmonellas, for the campylobacters to come and cause effects in your flocks. The other thing is that they don't treat viruses, right? So viruses are fairly different bugs that don't get cured by antibiotics. Antibiotics are strictly for bacteria, and there's different classifications of bacteria. You have the gram negatives, you have the gram positives, and certain antibiotics act only over gram negatives, others only over gram positives, and others have a broad spectrum. Now, you take the decision on which one to use depending on the bacteria that was isolated, gram negative or gram positive, the risk in the population, right? And also the medical use antibiotics. You don't use antibiotics that are used in humans because you don't want to cause resistance in humans first, and then you worry about the animals. So there's a lot of things going on here and a lot of information that needs to be provided to the audience.
Going back, Kenny, to what you were saying a while ago about being happy when they required a prescription to get them. I was too. But the thing about it is they only done it on the drenches to where you could do a mass number of chickens. I can go 5 minutes from me right now and buy any of the Tylan drugs that I want off the shelf. They're injectable. And we have people here just pulling it out of the bottle in high dosages, putting it in the water, mixing it up, and, giving it to their chickens without knowing if that particular antibiotic will cure what their chickens are having issues with just like Doc said. They're using penicillin for a bacterial type infection. So they're using the wrong medicines for the wrong problems.
Yep, I agree with you. There's a problem with so there's laws in place, but then there's a problem with how you control that people is basically doing what the law says. You can do that easily with big producers. It's really difficult to do it with small producers or small flocks. Yeah, it's unfortunate, but that's how it is. But again, at the same time, there's an opportunity there to explain people on how to do it. And these programs actually do that. I mean, that's why I'm very keen to talk with you guys and with others about these problems and other problems that we're not addressing, right? One of the biggest issues, and I'm departing from this topic a little bit to tell you what the big picture is. In veterinary medicine, most of the veterinarians or most of the students are willing to go on to small animal career or large animal or mixed practice. Well, the people that wants to go to mixed practice need to know poultry medicine, because those are the rural vets that end up in the farms, in which they have a flock of 40 chickens or they have game fowl. And people ask them, like, what can I do with these chickens? What can I do in terms of prevention? So those are the veterinarians that need to be trained. And unfortunately, we don't have many poultry certified veterinarians here in the US that can do that work. On top of that, since most of the veterinarians want to do small animal, there's just a limited chances of interaction that poultry veterinarians like me have with those students, because they track a different training program. So what I do, I just load the van with 12 students and I take them to a farm and we start talking about poultry concepts. I'm not really interested about them knowing about farming chickens, but mostly about disease prevention and preventative veterinary medicine. So how you can do good biosecurity and management, and that prevents diseases. So I can talk about my institution. We are working on that heavily because of the problems that we have with Newcastle disease virus in Southern California. And I know some other universities are doing it, but we need to go back to the roots in a certain sense. We need to train people, professionals, about farming, about livestock, about where our food comes from, about all those things that we tend to lose with all computers and technology and that sort of thing. It goes deeper than the use of antibiotics and the possibility of veterinarians to do outreach. It's more on our side of things to show our kids that from where our food comes from, why we have poultry facilities producing chickens, why we have eggs in the store, in the market, and from where they come.
You're talking about how they use it for preventive measures. And I think that's most of the cases. I actually think that they're not exactly trying to cure a disease as much as they are trying to prevent it. Yeah. And they're always trying to they call it a antibiotic program. You know what I mean? So it's before the store, before shipping, it's the baby chicks, it's bringing birds on my yard, I better protect all my other birds. That's, I think, the biggest problem.
There's other things, since people like programs, right? One of the things that I do with our clients, basically, is to put them in a disease prevention program. And since people likes adding stuff to the feed or to the water, there's lots of things that you can add that don't induce, antibiotic resistance. And they're not antibiotics. I mean, we have oregano oil, we have, garlic extract. There's acids, organic acids. You even can add vinegar in certain instances. You need to be careful because sometimes that reduces palatability of water. And if chickens stop drinking, right, I mean, there's a huge problem. But there's certain ways in which you can prevent for stress periods. And you can basically provide a harsh environment for the pathogenic bacteria, for the bacteria that cause disease. Those are things that you can add into a program, a disease prevention program, which is inside a biosecurity program, right? With all the vaccines that are biologics, they're not antibiotics. So for that, you need to do an assessment of the premise. So a veterinarian or someone that knows about animal science should go into a premise and then evaluate how things are done. Then we evaluate which pathogens have been in that premise. If you've had an outbreak of necrotic enteritis or of E. coli, and then try to see which products are available or which things that are generic can help prevent that, right? You have the management, the cleaning, disinfection, the management, the movement restriction, and also you have vaccines. In certain places it might be good to use one of these live E. coli vaccines, let's say. But it's not just taking the decision from a neighbor that comes and tells you to go, hey, there's a new vaccine on mycoplasma. Oh, I'm going to use it. Do you have problems with mycoplasma? I don't know, but I'm going to use it because I want to prevent, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, not necessarily, right? Because if you start poking your chickens with several different things, you're also challenging them with stuff. And sometimes it's even worse than having a disease.
So what are we going to do when, I mean, at the rate we're going, and they're trying to stop the use of antibiotics indiscriminately by putting it to script, but it doesn't seem to be working completely. What are we going to do when the antibiotics no longer work? That the tools that you have aren't there anymore?
Yeah. So what I can tell you is that there's a lot of commercial farms that are going organic. And in that organic production, you cannot use antibiotics. You have to feed them organic feed, and they have to have access to the outside. What happens with those poor birds when they get sick, which they don't do as often as you might think, they just die like crazy. And you have 60% mortality, or you even send them to the market or send them to euthanasia before they finish their production time. So the same will happen with these birds. I mean, the birds will die and we won't be able to do anything, which is sad because for someone like me, a veterinarian, that we studied this because we want to help animals, we just cannot do it because we don't have the right tools. I can tell you that you can use as preventatives the oregano oil and the vinegar and those things, but those are not treatments. I mean, we try most of the times to use them as treatments, but they just don't work, right?
That's your preventative right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. The oregano, especially, that's a great immune system builder.
Yeah.
It'll strengthen the immune system.
But you cannot use a bazooka in order to kill, a microscopic organism.
True.
And that's what we do with lincomycin when we don't need it, right? I mean, maybe in order to prevent, you need to use oregano oil at a certain concentration rather than using the bazooka antibiotic that you're using and causing problems. So it's just a matter of the authorities to realize the level of abuse of antibiotics in order to start adding restrictions of sale for everyone. Of course, the priority are humans. So when all these things are causing problems in terms of public health, they'll just eliminate them from the stores and from the shelves.
Yeah.
And they will probably reinforce that in small feed stores. So we're digging our own grave in a certain sense.
You and I talk about it all the time, and this is what I like about how you think as far as veterinarian medicine and poultry diseases, is that we think of things as the flock, not the individual. And I always try to tell people, try to think of it as a flock healthy mentality.
Yeah.
Think about what it's doing to the whole flock rather than trying to deal with one bird. So is it better just to cull the birds than to try to treat them most of the time?
Sometimes it is. When we talk about animal lives in general, you need to be responsible on your assessment. So there's different ways in which you can assess if an animal will make it or not. Euthanasia is usually linked to animals that cannot make it, right? That after a good assessment, you realize that they're not going to be able to survive and they're not going to be able to basically get cured from a condition. And on top of that, in most of infectious diseases, those animals are hubs for contamination. So they will be infecting your other birds. The biggest example is Pasteurella multocida, which is fall cholera, right? So you have fall cholera in a flock, which usually comes from rodents. So that's where your biosecurity is with problems, or cats or dogs. And then you have an outbreak. One animal is sick and is shedding so much bacteria that it's infecting all the rest of the flock. So the advice is to go there and euthanize every animal that is sick in order to prevent the spread of the disease, right? That's, of course, after reviewing, analyzing, and having a clear diagnosis of what you're dealing with. In general, what you said is really true. Like, we tend to think about birds in general as individuals, and that's not bad. I mean, it's not wrong in terms of the way in which humans socialize with animals. But when you're talking about health preventative strategies, you need to think of them about the flock. And it's not that I'm just forgetting about the individual. On the contrary, I'm adding to that individual his pen mates, and also the food, the water, the environment, the coops, the perches, which they're not animated, but at the same time, they form part of what my patient is, which is the flock, right? So the flock even includes the feed and the water. There's a lot of diseases that come from water, bacteria in suspension in water, well waters that are not really well potabilized. Well, that's my flock, right? I do an assess as a veterinarian. I go and I not only check on the animals, I also check on the well. And I order testing for that well to see how many coliforms it has. So what's the contamination of that water? I grab a bunch of feed and I send it to analyze, and I say like, well, maybe my animals are immunosuppressed. I want to check the level of protein of my feed, right? I give recommendations of which feeds to use. Oh, you're using only grains. Well, maybe you need to mix it with concentrate. Concentrate will be giving you all the vitamins and minerals that are essential for these animals. If you think about diets, for example, usually diets for animals are corn, soy for birds. Corn and soy are deficient in essential amino acids for chickens, right? So we need to add that in a vitamin pack, in a mineral pack. So that's the flock concept, right? It's not that that animal is a poor doer, I will call it. Yes, but I'm protecting the flock, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you a story, and this is very, very illustrative of what we're talking today. There's a group of people here in the university that have a flock, apparently students. I didn't know about that. And they contacted me because they had respiratory issues and mortality. And we are under avian influenza season. So my advice was, you guys need to submit birds to the lab in order to do a proper diagnosis. The answer was, we're not here to kill chickens. We're here to save them.
Wow.
So there's a problem there, right?
Mm-hmm.
The problem that sometimes we don't reach out to the people that knows in order to start something, right? And then the other thing is that your mind is not prepared to receive advice without putting your feelings on it, right? If we're talking about the foreign animal disease, you need to do testing. My response was, if you don't want to euthanize birds, swab them and send those swabs to the lab, right? So there's ways and ways to interact with people and to educate them. But sometimes people has this misconception about livestock veterinarians or people that works with production animals, in which the only thing that we want is money. No, we need to feed people. We want to feed people with good quality protein. At the same time, we want to work on good welfare and good behavior of those animals. And we want to give them the best life that they can so they can feed us, right? Some people is not willing to hear or to understand. So, you know.
You know, as a breeder, and this is what I tell my students, is when I have a disease or a sick bird, that's a weak link on my farm.
Oh, yeah.
Not only is it going to affect the other birds, but even if I can cure it, if I can treat it and get the disease where I'm not seeing the symptoms anymore, it's still a weak link. And I'm going to produce more birds like that one. That bird's going to produce more sick birds or potentially sick birds. So I'm always telling them, anytime you have a sick, defective, or substandard bird, it's always best to cull it and cull it fast and then stay ahead of the game.
I think we're getting into just what the doctor was talking about, though, Kenny. And I mean, you talk about this a lot. People's getting out of the functions of life as seeing chickens as livestock. They're looking at them as domestic pets, so to speak, like cats and dogs.
Right.
So when it comes to culling, and we talk about this a lot, they don't want to do it. They can't do it. A lot of them has issues with that. And, you know, that's something I know with me and Kenny growing up, I really had to work with because I was there too. I didn't want to do the culling that I needed to do. But in order to be a breeder and go forward, you have to put those implements of culling in your program. You have to.
So one of the things that it's really important to start talking with everyone is the fact that when you use antibiotics, it's because you failed. It's not that you use them because you want to be successful. When you have sick birds, it's because you're not doing things right.
Yeah.
When you have to use antibiotics to treat them, it's because you didn't do things right. There's ways in which you can do things right so they don't get sick. That's the right path in order to raise chickens. And not only chickens, other animals too. And the same happens, like if you think about your mom, right? Back in the day when you were a child, put that coat on, don't go out and don't get wet, cover your feet. She was doing exactly the same, right? Prevention. If we get sick, it's their failure. They cannot go to work. They cannot do their normal life. They cannot do anything. So that's the thing that we need to be telling everyone, that when they do use antibiotics, it's because they're doing things wrong.
But you have to get in the mind of like these game fowl breeders. Having sick birds on your farm is normal to them.
It's a norm.
It's a norm.
Yeah.
And then treating them with antibiotics is normal to them.
Yep.
So it's just part of the deal. They have their farm. Having sick chickens is just something they have to deal with. They think it's normal. They think everybody goes through this.
Yep.
It's not,
There's a lot of management there too. Like I've been to several game fowl farms and I see that there's a lot of birds. And like in everything in life, you don't have more things than the ones that you can care for, right? It could be a business, it could be a hobby, and we all like our hobbies, right? Let's say that I like cars. I won't have 5 cars if I cannot put gas on them, right? And I won't have 5 cars because I cannot drive them all. The same with chickens. Like I cannot have 120 birds because I cannot buy feed for them or because I cannot provide the care that they need. And that's the game that I see in this kind of premises. There's a lot of people having a lot of birds, many more than the ones that they can handle, and they cannot really provide for them at the point in which sometimes I go to places where even the water is dirty. The water is dirty or there's no even water. So when that's happening is when you have to think about it and say like, well, I will reduce my flock numbers and I will keep as many birds as I can keep because I want them to be healthy and I want the best bird. I mean, that's the deal, right? If you have 120 birds that suck, right? You're not doing a good hobby or you're not successful in what you're doing.
Most of them that have a lot of birds, though, it's because they're selling them.
Yeah.
Okay. And so they are going to treat them because every bird has a monetary value.
Mhm.
So they're going to give them medication. I feel sorry for the person that's buying those birds.
Yeah.
You took the words right out of my mouth, Kenny. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. Because they're bringing those faulty birds, they're bringing those weak links to their place.
Yep.
And then they don't understand why for the next few years they're running into disease problems or running into.
You know how you can control that? Because this is a market, right? So there's a consumer and there's a seller. So if the consumer starts asking papers,
Yeah.
right? So can you give me your mycoplasma status of your flock? Like send blood to the lab and tell me if you're MG positive or if you're MG negative or if you're MS positive or MS negative. Tell me if they're vaccinated against Marek's disease. Talk with me about your disease prevention status. Do you work with a veterinarian? Those things are the ones that at the end, or even your pulorum status, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we know that it's not that common. We know that in the commercial farms it's eradicated, but that will put people in check.
Yep.
And they will start doing things a little bit better than what they're doing it now. It's our fault as consumers sometimes things that are going on. There's no big companies that are able to regulate this kind of business, right? So we as consumers need to regulate it and start asking paperwork.
That's what I've been telling everybody is that we control that.
Yep.
As consumers, as the buyer of those birds, we can control that. We can dictate what they do and what they don't do. And if we don't demand it, then they're not going to be able to sell their birds. And I've had people call me and says that I'm ruining their business because these people are requesting or asking something that they shouldn't have to answer. They think that they should just come around their yard, buy the birds that they say they should buy, and then leave happily with their chickens.
Yep.
And then what they do is they call me and say, "What's going on with my chicken? I bought it from so and so, and now they're sick," instead of demanding those kind of things. So I've been preaching that for a long time, is that we control that as buyers.
So there's a producer here in California that sells to Tylan, I think. When I first met the guy, he wanted to join the program because he wanted to know about keeping a flock healthy and to have a certificate in order to say like, hey, my birds are healthy. They've been tested, right? I see that for people that trades with outside the U.S. I don't see it as much with people trading inside the U.S. And there's a lot of bird movement here in the U.S.
Yeah.
Like there's birds from Alabama to California, from California to Alabama every day, probably.
Well, even the NPIP doesn't test for everything, right?
No, but that's the first step, right?
Yeah.
So with NPIP, you open the door to all good things to a flock, right? I also understand that there's some people that doesn't want to deal with government, but NPIP is a really great program that allows you to trade internally. And that's a first step in order to do other things, like checking for other diseases or getting used to sampling, getting used to interact with the laboratory. Laboratories have, in every state, in most of the states, have programs for small flocks. They won't rip you off with $1,000 of a bill. They will treat you really fairly. And the reason is that all those testings are subsidized by the government. We want to know what small flocks have. We want to be able to advise them. Like at least here in California, we work really closely with the lab. And whenever there's something that consumer or the guy that sends the birds wants to know, they put us in contact with him, either me or my colleague that works in extension. The same systems are created in other states. So we need to get more used to doing good health prevention and medicine in general.
I know we're talking a lot about antibiotic use and the use of medications and stuff, and vaccinations is a huge one because there's a lot of people that are vaccinating, not just vaccinating for the prevalent diseases in their area, they're actually vaccinating for everything, thinking that they're covering all the possibilities. So what's happening to someone who's buying birds from these people who are vaccinating for everything and then bringing those birds on their yard,
Yep.
those vaccinated birds onto their yard?
So when you buy birds, you buy everything that comes with the bird,
Yep.
right? So not only feathers and legs and nails, you're also buying, the vaccines that were applied at day of age. Or if you buy pullets, you're buying all the live vaccination that they've got throughout their life. One of the biggest problems that I hear around, other than the mycoplasma, is the ILT, the laryngotracheitis. So whenever you bring birds that are vaccinated against laryngotracheitis into a flock that is naive, you create a huge problem. And I'll explain why. There's 3 different types of ILT vaccines. One of them is chicken embryo origin, which is the one that it's most hot, and it can revert to virulence or it can become pathogenic and kill birds after 4 passages. So it's just a matter of bringing a bird vaccinated with a chicken embryo origin ILT vaccine, and that vaccine to jump to 4 chickens in order to become pathogenic and start killing. The other vaccine is called CEO, so it's grown in chicken embryo culture, in a culture in cells. So that one, it takes 7 passages in order to become pathogenic. And then you have the recombinant vaccines, which are poorly protective, but at the same time, they're very safe. Those are extremely expensive. They are stored in liquid nitrogen, so they're not used in small flocks. So that leaves you with 2 vaccines. When do you vaccinate against ILT? When you live in a place where ILT is a problem, right? It might be a problem because you're close to a commercial premise and that commercial premise deals with ILT, or it might be a problem because you don't do things right.
Yeah.
So sometimes the solution is stopping the application of the vaccine. And how do you know that? Just assessing the environment. And then we go back to the idea of flock, not individual, right? So the flock, not only the flock, but also what it's in the surroundings of the flock. So if I have a client that has, 60 birds that lives close to a big commercial premise that is dealing with ILT, I might talk with the owner of that farm and tell him, like, when are you vaccinated against ILT? I need to know because I need to align with your vaccination program. It sounds irrational, right? Because that big producer won't like you because you have a small flock. But they're actually more open than what you might think because they don't want troubles. And they might even offer you vaccination at the time in which you are vaccinating. On the contrary, so another example is IBV, infectious bronchitis. So infectious bronchitis usually exists where there are chickens. And most of the times, the problems are self-inflicted when you use a lot of vaccines or when you use live vaccines in small flocks. If you don't have issues against IBV, why to use it, right? Now, there's vaccines that are Newcastle IBV combined. Are those good vaccines? They're terrible. I've been actually telling the people in the industry not to use it for different reasons than for small flocks. In small flocks, usually you need NDV. If you are in places like Southern California, you don't need IBV. And the way in which it gets applied, so IBV and NDV, so Newcastle and bronchitis, they both bind to the same receptor in the chicken. So these vaccines are standardized and calibrated in order to have enough of one and the other so they don't compete for the receptors. That's when you apply the vaccine spray or when you apply it in a good way, when you know how you're doing things, not when you use a 1,000 dose bottle for 10 chickens, right? So that creates the problem that NDV doesn't take. So you don't have a good take for Newcastle. You don't have a good take for IBV. So you think you vaccinated and you're protected, but you're not. You're actually throwing virus to the environment.
Mm-hmm.
Those viruses change and they cause problems in the future. So all these things are probably very technical, but the point that I want to make is that you don't use vaccines that you don't need. And the program that we recommend usually is Marek's disease virus at day of age, pox virus. That's it. And even pox, if you live in places where there's a lot of mosquitoes. If you don't have mosquitoes, you don't need the pox vaccine.
Did you see my outline, Frank? Look at the ones I put on there that he probably will recommend. It was Pox and Merrick's, and the rest of them
Yeah.
down below are ones he doesn't recommend. That's funny. I had a friend of mine who had great birds, a really healthy, really strong family, never had any problems, never had any coccidiosis, and his wife decided to bring some baby chicks on his yard from one of the hatcheries, and they suggested that he got the coccidiosis vaccine. Okay. So he brought those on. They grew up. They mixed them in with their yard. And all of a sudden, his yard was full of coccidiosis. And he fought that for years because of that.
Yeah.
So
That's another example, right? So when these coccidia vaccines came into play, these are attenuated strains. So they're not the ones that cause severe mortality. But you're talking that even with that, producers had huge losses because if you don't have the good conditions, coccidia needs to cycle at least 4 times before leaving immunity. And if you have flocks where the coccidia can replicate faster than 4 times, let's say high humidity, lower temperatures, the vaccine, light like fire, and then you had to start controlling it with chemicals. So then there's other problems, like, for example, here in California, which is in Northern California, which is very dry. So you apply the vaccine and the vaccine doesn't take. The protozoa dies pretty quick because it's very dry. So the industry, what it's using now is just a combination between vaccine and chemicals in order to make it work. And actually, what you're doing with vaccination is seeding the environment. So you're making sure you're displacing all the bad coccidia in the environment for coccidias that they will be protected by the immunity generated by the vaccine or by the chemicals. So there's a lot of breaks. Even in these places where you have a lot of control conditions, in small flocks it's even worse because you don't control everything. You don't control the humidity, you don't control the temperature. You have the perfect scenario for producing a problem. So that's why I don't really recommend coccidia vaccines in small flocks unless there's a way of controlling all the conditions, which is very difficult.
yeah. Frank, you have any more questions? I mean, I have a huge outline, and Dr. Gallardo is pretty much covering everything.
It's like he was going off the outline, really. I was taking, I was like, how great is this, But he hit the nail on the head. I mean, really, we didn't even have to ask him any questions.
I could have took a break because you were covering everything, man.
Me and Kenny try to put an emphasis on, when people's going to get their seed fowl or the brood fowl from another breeder, we try to put an importance on that. Just how important is it for them to ask the questions, what are your chickens vaccinated for? Before they take them back, mix them in with their chickens, of course.
Yeah. Well, that's really important, right? I mean, it's just like when you buy a car and you need to know, if it has all-wheel drive or not. What's the source of the car? Does it have a warranty? Stuff like that. Even more important with live animals. And there's a lot about being a good neighbor too. And that's something that I also try to tell everybody that I interact with. It's not just your flock, right? It's your neighbor's flock or whoever interacts with you. Because if your birds get sick, most likely your neighbor's birds will get sick, because if they get sick, you won't have good biosecurity, right? It's kind of like the perfect storm, right? One of the things that you have to ask someone that you're buying birds from is the status of their breeders. As simple as that. So it's so simple to send samples to a lab. Like, you pay $20 and then you can get the full screening of, antibodies against viruses, bacteria. You can get information about the status of mycoplasma. You can get information about the ILT status. You can get information about pullorum status. So those are diseases that really cause you troubles if you have them in a naive flock. You have to think that you're not only buying the bird because it's pretty. You have other birds. You have your own flock that might suffer from a pretty bird that was sick. It's like buying a Ferrari, right? You buy the Ferrari because it's beautiful, if you have the money, of course. But then you have to pay in order to service that car. And each service will rip you off. So there's a lot of decisions that you take, and you have to take them with perspective, because you need to think about the whole premise, the flock, not the individual. So what I would suggest, as I said before, vaccination status, right? So all the vaccines that were applied since the bird hatched. Hopefully, some sort of veterinary certificate. And that might be difficult to get. But at the same time, NPIP will do a portion of that. So NPIP status, like buy from certified NPIP breeders. If you're unsure about the mycoplasma status, ask for mycoplasma testing. Now, don't get freaked out if they're MS positive, because most of the flocks are MS positive, but MG is different, right? There's a lot of MG positive flocks, but there's still MG negative flocks.
So there's a lot of positive Mycoplasma synovia flocks.
MS, yes. MS is endemic in the US, I would say, in layers at least. Commercial layers are almost all positive to Mycoplasma synovia, not for MG. Now, MG is a different beast in a certain sense because it causes a lot of problems. What everybody talks about, CRD, for example.
Yeah.
It's difficult, and people started vaccinating a lot, actually, more than what I would like to see. It's better to just keep it out than start vaccinating, because that will make all your birds positive, right?
Yeah.
And you won't be able to differentiate between vaccine and MG negative, and MG positive from the field. And there's a huge difference between one or the other. So it depends on, there's a risk in everything you do, right? In life in general. Depending on how prepared you are, you can deal better with one risk or the other. You don't want to jeopardize your flock because of bringing a bird from where you don't have enough information. At least you need to get good information in order to tell this guy afterwards, like, hey, you didn't tell me that they were MG positive. If you can prevent that, doing the testing before.
There's a lot of people out there that believe that everybody has mycoplasma.
Yes.
MG.
Yes.
They just think it's common and they just accept it that way. Where I would be freaked out if I got it on my yard. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
It's more common in different areas.
Yes.
Coryza is another one. They think everybody has coryza too.
Everybody vaccinates for it.
Mm-hmm.
I would say out of, and this is just off the top of my head, I guess, people in this area itself, I would say a good at least three quarter either has it or has vaccinated for it.
So what's the vaccination program that they use for coryza? Do you know?
I don't know. No, I don't know because I don't do that.
So what do you guys think they do?
They don't do nothing. Antibiotics, pretty much.
Oh, okay.
No, I thought they do have a vaccination program. I don't know what they're using.
Oh, yeah, they do. Yeah.
So they probably apply one vaccine on the life of the chickens.
But it's a
Yeah.
it's a non-virus vaccine.
Yeah, it's a killed vaccine, a white product.
Yes.
So, and this is, vaccines are part of the vaccination program. So basically, there's some vaccines that you can apply one time in the life of the chickens and they will protect forever. There's others that if you apply it once, they don't do anything. That's coryza.
Coryza is one of them.
If you apply it once in the life of the chickens, you probably won't even generate antibodies. And the reason is that killed vaccines don't have this property of growing in amount. The bug doesn't grow. So basically, the amount that you put is not enough in order to generate immunity in one exposure. You need to apply it at least twice before the lay onset. And then if you have continuous problems, you might even look into apply it again in long-lived birds. So, it's not surprising to see programs in which people tells me like, hey, have you vaccinated against Newcastle? I ask, and they say, yes. How long ago? Oh, no, when they were 1 day of age, right? Newcastle is one of those vaccines in which you need to apply in places where it's really hot. You need to apply it every 3 months or even more than that. In places that are dangerous, like you need to apply it twice a year. And you need to apply it well, because if you apply it one time poorly, that won't protect you. So there's a lot of things in terms of vaccination that need to be revised. I mean, which vaccines to apply, which vaccines not to apply, and how to apply them. Exactly the same as antibiotics. It's not that 3 days a shot is equivalent to a 10-day treatment. Some vaccines need 2 doses, some vaccines needs 3 doses, some vaccines need only 1 dose.
You're being generous because you're saying 3 shots for antibiotics. They're not doing 3 shots. They're doing 1 shot in the breast. That's what I've seen.
Yeah.
I've been in this a long time, and they've been doing that for a long time. That's nothing new. That's how they do it. So what happens when if you go to a farm that is vaccinating for coryza, and let's say they're even doing it right, and you buy a bird and you bring it to your yard, then what? Is that a problem there?
So if you have coryza in the flock, that means that your birds got sick and they recovered. The recovery generates a carrier status.
Yep.
So those birds will be eliminating coryza their whole life whenever they are in periods of stress. And that's why you don't want to have coryza in your flock.
So it doesn't matter whether he vaccinates, you're bringing coryza on your yard.
No.
Yeah.
They still shed. Yeah.
Yes. Now, if you vaccinate them well, the shedding, so the amount of bacteria that are shed from those positive birds or carrier birds will be less. And that's what you play in commercial farms with multiple age complexes, and they're positive to coryza. You want them to have enough antibodies to control the infection that is floating around. So you reduce the amount of bacteria that is shed into the environment, and you reduce the chances of new birds to get infected.
Now, if there is a good side to this, something you can't do with mycoplasma is once they have it because it's passed through the egg.
Yes.
It's vertical. But coryza is horizontal. If you get rid of the parent stock and clean up and bring in the young, then you're good to go.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't know that.
Yeah, you can just start from scratch and start with fresh new birds and eliminate coryza. Coryza is one of those bacteria in which they're very labile. They die pretty quick with cleaning, disinfection. Now, it's different to clean and disinfect your kitchen, which has tiles, than clean and disinfect dirt, right?
Mhm.
So that's the other thing. You need to probably let the soil rest for quite some time in order to eliminate pathogens that are in the environment. Yeah. Your coccidias, your bacteria, viruses, etc.
And I didn't vaccinate for it. I done pretty much what Kenny was talking about with the parent stock.
Yeah.
And it took a while, but you are able to do it without, using a vaccine. But it works.
Yeah. I have a comment from Nancy. What if your next door neighbor vaccinates for Newcastle disease? Are your birds now susceptible to getting the disease because you have unvaccinated birds? So, like in everything, vaccination and everything that you want to generate population immunity, there's a good neighbor thing. If you vaccinate and your neighbor is not vaccinating, your neighbor has the same chances of getting infected by a wild type virus that it's out there. But you that vaccinated have more chances of getting infected because your neighbor's birds won't be protected. So what happens is that your neighbor birds get infected and they eliminate so much virus into the environment that even you being vaccinated, your birds won't be protected. And then your other neighbor will get infected, and then your other neighbor will get infected. So this thing starts growing and growing. If everybody vaccinates in a concerted effort and you have antibodies against Newcastle disease in a community, and Newcastle disease comes, there will be neutralization of the infection, and also they will get infected and they will eliminate very few viruses. And those few viruses, when you have few viruses in the environment, it's much difficult to spread it into other neighborhoods. So that's the strategy of vaccinating against Newcastle. It's not really to prevent your birds for being euthanized if you have Newcastle disease virus. It's more to prevent the outbreak to extend at the point in which you need to kill everything that it's in a state or in a place.
Is there anything we're leaving out as far as how to properly use antibiotics and how to get away from the indiscriminate use of it and the consequences? Because I so desperately wanted to talk about this because for years, I've been seeing this for a long time, the way they use antibiotics and their thought about it and how they use it as a preventative and they're basically shooting their birds up with antibiotics all the time. I just see this going very badly for the future,
And they're eating those eggs too. Lala backyard.
Yeah, they are.
They're putting those antibiotics right back in themselves.
There's a disease residue. There's a vaccine residue, right?
Oh, yeah. So if I, for example, prescribe antibiotics into a layer facility, I have to use withdrawal time. So all those eggs for a period of time won't be able to be sold in the store. So that's the other reason why we use a lot of prevention in commercial farms. A lot, because we don't want them to get sick. On one hand, an ill bird don't produce. On the other hand, there's lots of expenses, right? And then if you think about the veterinary side, I don't want my birds to be sick because they won't produce it, because they do poorly, and because there's a welfare issue.
That's a lot of withdrawal time on those, especially on the stronger antibiotics. What is it? Average a couple of weeks, Doc?
Some of them are a month. When you're unsure about the withdrawal times, you always hit for a month.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a good idea. That's a great idea.
It's a lot of time.
We don't have any questions, so That's all the questions I have for you, Dr. Gallardo. I don't know what else to ask. I think we've covered everything really good. It's like Frank said, it looked like he was reading off my outline here.
Yeah, he done great. I thought he was.
No, I never gave it to him.
I thought, well, Kenny give you the outline, so.
Well, thank you, guys.
It's like, well, he covered that. I just
That's
skipping
awesome.
through this thing. So I didn't know. I wasn't sure I was in the show at all, I'll tell you the truth.
Yeah, he done great. He done great. But I really thought Kenny, I'd give you the outline. I really did.
No,
I really did. That's great. That's great.
No.
Thank you, guys. It's been fun. I mean, it's always fun to come here and talk with you. So I appreciate the invitation, and I appreciate being here.
We love having you.
Yeah.
Awesome.
He's going to come on real soon again. We're going to talk about parasites, probably tackle like internal parasites, especially worms, because that's a topic that is just as controversial as antibiotics, is worming your birds.
Oh, yeah.
If not more.
So I really want to dive into that. And then we'll maybe do another show. No, we will do another show on external parasites. So, because we've covered a lot of topics, within the year or two that we've been doing this. And I think we've covered most of the diseases. I keep telling them, if you have anything you want to talk about, just let me know, because I love having you on, and you're really educating the members and our followers. And they really enjoy the information from you because they feel like it comes from a reliable source. It's coming from a poultry veterinarian.
Awesome. Happy to do it.
Yeah.
I see it as part of my job. I mean, I think there's a lot of people that needs this information.
Well, I know you do other fowl, other breeds of chickens, commercial industry too. But, I know the game fowl community really wants to thank you for what you're doing for the game fowl. That's, you're the first that's actually dove in, been a veterinarian, and it's dove in to the game fowl side of things. We're not used to this sort of spoiling us, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. So it's really good.
Thank you. Happy to do it. I mean, I have to wear different hats, right? But I'm happy to do it. I mean, at the end, how I see it is that this helps my primary job, which is, working on commercial poultry. I mean, that's where my heart is and my passion is. But if I can provide or extrapolate some of the information that we have in order to, produce protein for people to other poultry populations, I mean, that's helping me in order to, have less challenges in the commercial poultry side. So get a relation and establish a relation with the diagnostic lab. If you have to pay $20 for testing worth, $500, it's totally worth it. And if you guys have issues on, interpreting results, ask them to get in communication with the extension veterinarian. They should be able in every state to provide insights and input on what you're doing and what problems you're having. People in the universities gets paid by you guys, by your tax dollars. So you need to use them.
Well, I know you're busy, Dr. Gallardo. I don't want to hold you up too much. I really appreciate the information. I know our listeners, followers, and our members are really appreciating it too. I can't wait to do the next one.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you, Kenny, Frank, for the invitation. And I'll be happy to come back again. I mean, I as I said, I have fun.
Thanks, Doc. We appreciate you. We really do.
All right.
Okay. Thanks.
Take care.
Thanks. Bye.
That was awesome.
He's great.
Truly awesome.
He's great, man. But seriously,
I feel blessed to have him on the show.
Hey, we are blessed to have him on the show. But I really seriously thought, okay, that was a good idea. Kenny, give him the outline to go off of.
I have in the past, but I didn't give him this one because
when you said he didn't have it, I was just blown away. I didn't know what to say, man, because he didn't do them in order, but he covered everything pretty much on it.
And sometimes he actually did.
Yeah.
But I just found myself skipping through things. I'm like, wow, that would have been a good one to talk about. But he covered it really well. And, so, I was starting to wonder if I was even in the show. He did such a good job with it. But I like how he covers it. He's comprehensive. I mean, he really goes through it. He's complete. He gives the information. Maybe that's the best way to do it. I mean, if it's on his mind, he should just talk about it.
Right.
And I can skip through it, I can have him come on, say everything, and say, thank you. Turn off,
Yeah. And he explains it in such a great way to understand it.
Yes.
He takes it and puts it down to where anyone can understand it. And, sort of the way you do with the website. Because I tell you this, with the online classes, if anybody had ever took a online class on any of these top medicines or antibiotics or even diseases, you'd pull your hair out. You wouldn't understand basically what he's talking about. But he does a great job of explaining it so everybody understands it. He's great.
Yeah, that's a good way of saying it. I guess the final lessons, and I was going to go over with it, but like you said, he did such a good job explaining them. Because what I like to do with him, and you might have noticed it, is I have my outline, and he'll talk about it. And he may cover treatments, he may cover symptoms, but a lot of times when I get to that part of the outline, I'll usually say, okay, I know we talked about it, but let's cover it all in this section. That kind of thing. And sometimes I kind of make him repeat himself or maybe be a little repetitious. And sometimes I feel bad about that too, but I just feel it's so important to make sure we combine them in certain sections too.
I think he understands that.
Plus also, you know how I work, Frank will be talking. Sometimes I don't even hear what Frank's saying because I'm looking at the outline. And then I go to re-listen to the show to see how it went. And Frank brought up some really good topics that I could have elaborated on. I could have expanded or responded to, and we could have made a conversation. And it really upsets me. But that happens too with Dr. Gallardo, where he's talking about something. I'm looking at the outline, so I'm not exactly listening to him fully because I'm trying to figure out what the next question is. And so what happens is it ends up being repetitious because I'm asking the question that he's already answered earlier.
Right. I'm bad for that.
But it wasn't so much with this one because it wasn't about diseases per se. It was about the use and misuse of antibiotics. Because I asked him last time I talked to him, I go, do you think we can come up with a show on this? I didn't know if it'd be a 5-minute explanation and it was done. He goes, yeah, we can come up with a show. I go, cool, because if anything these people need to learn more than the diseases themselves and the symptoms and how to treat them is the proper use of antibiotics and vaccines, because I'm seeing it all the time. They're using it wrong. And there's some people teaching this method, this practice of constantly using antibiotics and using them wrong and for the wrong reasons and not really paying attention to the disease. And there's beginners listening to this thinking they got to do the same thing. And it just frustrates me. And my members know it on the Breeders' Academy that I do not promote treatments. I do not promote fixing sick chickens. If you have sick chicken, that's a weakness that you need to cull. That's the way I believe.
Well, I look at it this way, and I would want the viewers and the members to see it the same way or consider about seeing it the same way. I look at it this way. If I've got any type individually or group or whatever it is that's on my farm and they became sick by whatever it may be, if they can't live and survive in the wild in the condition that they're at, then I'm going to cull them. If they can't live in the wild, then I don't want anything to do with them.
That's true. I stay as close to nature as possible. And I do. I just look at sick chickens as a weakness, and I will not perpetuate offspring from that particular bird. And I call them as fast as I can. You know what? I hardly ever have a sick chicken. Look at our members when we were doing that testimonial show. Mm-hmm. The same thing. There was a few of them that said that they trusted me. They got rid of the sick birds. And today they don't have any sick birds. They quit running a hospital.
Yeah, because you breed sick birds, you get sick birds. Yeah. You breed healthy birds, resistant birds, that's what you get.
He made a great point. If you have to medicate or give antibiotics, then you're doing something wrong. Yeah. You've messed up. That should have never happened.
Yeah.
Okay. And the fact that as a poultry veterinarian, he rarely even prescribes antibiotics, that blows me away.
5 times. He said in his career, 5 times, maybe 6.
What does that tell you right there?
Yeah.
That if you're getting ready to buy birds from someone and they give antibiotics or they're treating their birds all the time, then maybe you shouldn't be buying birds from those people. Okay.
I agree.
When they're openly saying that they're vaccinating or not so much vaccinating. I understand vaccinations a little bit in that
to a point.
I think the biggest problem is that they're vaccinating for stuff that they don't have in their area. I think that's a mistake. And I thought that was funny because I told you, look at the outline.
Yeah.
I had a list of diseases that people vaccinate for, and the ones I put at the top that he'll probably say that's the ones you should vaccinate, but not the others. It was Merrick's and pox.
Yeah.
And that was it. Okay. So do I know this guy or not?
Hey, yeah, you had him down. I mean, when you wrote that out, you seriously, I think that's the best outline you've ever wrote up for one of the professionals that's come on and actually been interviewed. But he was spot on with everything. You had that written out just perfectly the way he explained it. It was dead on.
We didn't get a lot of questions. And I think too is because he was doing such a good job at talking about it that you didn't want to miss anything. So it was hard to actually type something in and not miss anything, because normally we would have got a lot of questions. Plus, I probably should have said earlier, get your questions in.
True.
I was just so busy. I put Nancy's on there, forgot about her. You know what I mean? He had to read it himself. I felt bad about that, you know?
Here's the thing, and I hate to admit this, but I didn't even see you put it up there until he started reading it.
Oh, is that right?
Honestly, I was so in tune to listening to him that, I wasn't paying attention to. You could have sent me a message at the bottom of the screen. I'll never know it.
The only problem with having an expert on your show has a lot of information, is really good at translating that. He's real informative, and you just want to listen to him. Is that I sit there listening to him. Yes, I'm thinking about what I want to say and everything, but it goes so long between times I talk that by the time I'm ready to talk, I forgot how to talk. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's like, I can't spit it out because I forgot how to talk,
That was a really good show, which, all of his shows are really good. They're informative. They're to the point. He gets the message out to the viewers, but this one was really a really good topic. And I'm looking forward to the next one, the internal parasites. I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah, because we're going to tackle worms in a big way because there's a serious, I guess you could say, a fault in the way they're, treating for worms and the way they're dealing with worms. And I don't want to say too much about it. What's that?
They're poisoning their soil and their birds, destroying their liver and organs. Yeah.
To give you a hint, I haven't wormed my birds in probably 15 years. Okay. So what does that tell you? And I got the healthiest bird.
You can tell that by the pictures of them, Okay, I say a bird is over a 50 egg count on a slide. He's not going to have real nice shiny plumage. His head's not going to be red. They're not going to be active. They're going to be underweight. So if a bird looks like yours and they're at their weight and carry themselves the way they do, I don't think a few worms is going to hurt them. I really don't.
Well, think of it. I mean, this is what really attracted me to Dr. Gallardo in the first place. When I can't remember what show it was. It might have even been the first one. I don't know. But he was a big proponent of paying more attention to the flock rather than the individual bird. Yep. Okay, it's all about the flock. So if you have one bird that's sick or having a problem, sometimes it's better just to cull that bird than infecting the rest of the flock. Okay. And so I've always done that. Whenever I have a bird that seems wormy, now I could pump a bunch of wormers in him and everything. Chances are he may never come back like he was, if you notice it, if it's that bad. And if it's not affecting the other birds, I'm not seeing it as a problem throughout the flock. It's just that one bird. I'm going to cull that bird. That doesn't mean I'm going to flip out and start worming all my birds because one bird had worms.
Yeah.
He just was susceptible. That's all.
I agree with that. Same way with the external parasites. How many times, Kenny, have you found one bird on your yard that had lice or mites of some sort, and you check the rest of your birds and they don't have one on them?
Yeah. Chase says, he says using kerosene, lye, and other chemicals to work a bird. See it posted all the time. I know. Yeah, it's crazy.
I seen them use Drano and soak them in oats and feed them. That'll kill the worms. I'll agree. That's a good worm killer, but it's going to kill every organ on that bird too.
We had a couple of members who, and this kind of shed a light for me, how the anxiety people have. When they said, okay, I decided that I was going to trust you. I was going to stop treating my birds and give them medication, antibiotics, and start culling the sick. And you could see it in their face that, oh my God, I can't believe I'm doing this. Mm-hmm. So you can see why people are hesitant to do that. But trust me, if you practice good biosecurity, you cull the sick, substandard, and defective birds, and you only breed to the healthy, yeah, it'll feel like you're going in the wrong direction at first, but I'm telling you, you're going to have a much healthier flock in the long run. And if you're someone who takes them to the shows and you got to bring birds off your farm all the time, or you bring them back, or you're getting new birds, then practice good biosecurity, have a good quarantine area, and protect, and so that if there's anything that becomes symptomatic, you're protecting the rest of your flock. Again, it's not the individual bird. I'm one of those persons that when I take a bird off my farm, I sell it. Well, I don't sell it so much anymore, but I'll give them away. I'll get rid of them. Okay. If I go to a show, those birds are never coming back. Once they leave my farm, they're never coming back to my farm ever. I don't take that kind of chance.
Me and you have spoken of this many times, and I've told you different times. There's not a bird in this world that I would trade for all of my flock. One bird for all those. So really, that's what you're doing. If you're not doing good biosecurity, if you're not doing the quarantine for at least a month on that bird, to make sure it's not going to get sick on you. You're trying to trade that one bird for your whole flock. Because if you bring that bird home, put him in with your flock, and he does have a disease, the first time his immune system gets down, then you're going to see a rapid case that you don't want to have anything to do with. It's going to go through your birds. And some of those are pretty bad. They can be curable, but they're still, you don't want it in your flock.
Yeah, most of the diseases on your yard are ones you brought in, actually.
Right.
Dead Game says, I haven't seen worms since I stopped using dog food many years ago. I do not worm either. See? Well, I wouldn't use dog food anyways, but
Yeah.
you know.
Well, here's the thing. I haven't seen worms since I stopped. That's the best part. Stop using them.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Right. And he doesn't worm them either.
I did too. I think all of us at some point has done the dog food, cat food.
I used to. I was there years ago. I did it too, you know. I don't believe in using other formulas, other feeds that were formulated for other animals in my feed. My feed these days are pretty simple. My formula,
mine is too.
It's pretty simple.
Mine is too. It's not pretty. It's not Skittles. It doesn't look like, oh, that's beautiful feed, you know.
Formula that I create called the Maximus feed. It didn't have game fowl feed in, but it had racing pigeon mix in it. It had the pellet in it. It had some corn, not oats, but wheat and things like that, and sunflower seeds. Even had a little calf manna. I've had a number of nutritionists look at it, and they liked it.
I've used it.
Because what it was something that a lot of people can't afford to buy a ton of feed from a mill, okay? And so we needed to come up with something that would satisfy their needs that they could get off the shelf. So they could go buy the bags off the shelf and then they put their feed together, but it wasn't gamecock feed because I wanted to get away from the gamecock feed. I never did feel that was any good. And this worked really good on my birds. Well, nowadays with COVID and the supply chain being all messed up, and it's really getting hard to get some seeds in certain feeds. Racing pigeon feed being one of them.
Yeah.
I decided to change my feed, so I made it really simple. And the Neutrino All Flock is one of the best pellets I know. It has the best nutritional profile. It's the closest you're going to get to natural without being organic. And it was told by Jack Dodd, who I think is one of the best breeders out there. And I started using it, and I love that stuff. And my birds have never been better since I've been using it. And because of the difficulty in getting certain feeds, I'll tell you what I do. And this is pretty simple, is I use the All Flock, Neutrino All Flock. I use 4 parts of that. And then I have a can that's mixed with corn, scratch, and sunflower seeds. I can't even get wheat these days.
Yeah.
And I mix that up real good. And so I do 4 parts of the All Flock, 2 parts of the mixture I just told you. That's it. And my birds are doing great. I'm getting chicks on the ground. They are active and healthy. You know, they just look fine. So I don't give them any supplements. I don't give them any extras. What I just told you is the complete feed that I give them.
There was a comment that I made on Facebook on feed. Everybody was showing their feed off, and the first thing anybody would say about the feed, oh, that looks great. They want it to look good to them, but the main thing is educate yourself on what each grain does, how much they need on a daily basis. That's really where your feed comes into that point at. And, basically what each grain does. But a lot of people, as long as it looks good, it don't matter what it's got in it. As long as it's colorful and it looks good.
That's why they like the gamecock feeds.
Yeah.
I don't think I think the gamecock feeds are highly deficient nutritionally.
And they're that way because of the money. They don't want to put nothing in it that's going to raise the price of making it. They want it as cheap as possible.
As far as feeding is concerned, if you're providing a really good feed, like I think All Flock is, the Neutrino All Flock it's an awesome feed, okay? You don't need a lot of supplements. You don't need a lot of additives. You don't need to add all this other stuff. Provide the feed that I told you. It's a fairly cheap way to go considering the other stuff that's out there. Give them a good grit and you're good to go. I don't give them any supplements whatsoever anymore. And they're doing great. They feel good. They're active and everything.
The only thing that I give as far as a supplement is oregano. I use some
Well, that's in the feed now. They actually put that in the All Flock.
Yeah.
The Neutrino. I should get stock from them. I advertise them so much, I might as well get them to pay me for it,
But you're right. So. It is. And man, when you open those bags up, that oregano hits you, you're like, whoa, I can't go to
it's like, Mamma Mia. Oh my God.
I can't go to these Italian places and eat anymore because you smell that oregano. And the first thing that comes to my mind is chicken feed. It's like I'm eating chicken feed.
Yeah. So let's talk about a few lessons that I hope you learn by listening to us and Dr. Gallardo. And hopefully maybe give these lessons some thought. Maybe it'll help you with your birds, helping with your breeding, help you raise healthier fowl, and get away from all these medications and antibiotics and maybe even some of the vaccinations. I have them listed here. You can improve or create a strain if you're running a hospital. I firmly believe that. So that would mean getting rid of all those medications, vaccinations, and antibiotics. You'll find that by breeding for resistance over time, you're going to get better. It's not the medications that are making your fowl better. It's actually the selection. I look at sickness as a genetic weakness, because if you're breeding to a sick bird, you're actually going to produce more like them. And it's always better to breed for disease resistance. Some people are against that. Some people says it's non-existent, but I've been doing it. The story I told Dr. Gallardo in the beginning was how I did it. I mean, it was tough for me. I was scared. I was scared like some of these other guys where I had a lot of sick chickens. I just thought it was normal. I thought if you're going to have chickens, you're going to be dealing with disease. And then I made sure I had all the not the vaccination so much, but the medications and the antibiotics on my shelf to make sure I was covered. Okay. And then he went, I couldn't tell you how many there were, but it seemed like he's just tossing one at a time into the trash can. I could hear him breaking and everything.
That's a lot of money.
For a few years, it was tough. Now, my members, they said they did what I did, what I told them to do, and they sound like they got it done quicker.
Couple years.
Like there was a couple of them said within a couple of years, they were good to go. Well, it took me a little longer than that. Maybe I had it worse than they did. But to this day, I don't really have sick chickens. I mean, once in a very blue moon, I might have something, I just cull it.
I think at that time, too, you had probably more strains than they did. I think the ones that were saying that they were covered within a couple of years was just focusing on one strain, where back then at that time, you probably had more than one strain at that time.
Oh, I had all kinds. I had I had a lot of hundreds of birds, and I don't think I had strains at that time. I thought I did, but they were just mixed everything. Oh, it was insane. When I look at what I've got now compared to then, it's amazing, actually.
That's the good thing about pictures, because that shows us where we're going over the years, and that actually I try to take all I can of them, because it really tells you how you're going forward as a breeder just by looking at those pictures year after year after year.
Well, it shows you the progress, Yeah. So
pictures are great.
I always say it, if your offspring are not better than the parents, you're going in the wrong direction.
Going backwards.
Yeah. So cull the sick, breed to the healthy. Only medicate or vaccinate if absolutely necessary, or as a last resort, which for me is never. Okay. And then practice good biosecurity. That's a must.
Biosecurity is so important.
It is. And him and I, Dr. Gallardo and myself, I think that was one of the first shows we did was biosecurity. But I'll tell you, I'll revisit that over and over again in each show we do with him. I'll revisit that again as another show. That's how important it is.
It is.
And when we were talking to our members recently, when we were doing the testimonial videos, they took to heart what we said about biosecurity in such a way that they're scared to death to go to other farms now.
Mm-hmm.
Deathly afraid of, Yeah. So,
well, I've said this many a times. I'm so conscious about it that like Tractor Supply or other feed stores, anybody that sells any type of feed, I wear shoes in, but I don't ever wear my boots that I wear on my farm, ever. I disinfect them when I go in, I disinfect when I go out, but I never wear those boots out to the feed store. I always got a pair of Crocs that I use to go into the feed store. That way I can just take and every so often stick them down in a bucket of Clorox water or disinfect it, kill everything on them, and then I'm good to go for a little bit longer, but never the boots that I wear on my actual farm.
Yeah, the shoes I wear outside are completely different than the ones I wear outside this house.
Yeah. Just like when you came, you bought a pair of new boots just to go on my place with. I would go to Walmart and buy, like those $20 sneakers to go, like if I went to Chris's farm or someone else's farm for a visit, I would always, and usually I'm turning the price tag off of them and lace them up right there, when I'm getting ready to go on their farm. So
yeah,
$20 can save you a lot of remorse later on. It really can.
Yeah. It's like he was saying, what was it, a couple episodes ago? He said a dropping from like a goose or a duck that's the size of a dime can kill thousands of chickens when it comes to especially avian influenza.
That's terrifying.
Yeah, it
It's
is.
terrifying. It really is.
Go out there and one day they're all dead.
Yeah.
The flock you've been working so hard to improve and create,
And, you've
So
got a flock for 30 years. You put all this time in it. That's a lot of time. And just by stepping on feces and walking onto your yard, you could destroy everything that you've accomplished in just one step.
Someone was asking me recently, I think it was one of my members was asking me, how do you breed for disease resistance? It's actually real simple. You don't treat them for disease. You cull the sick, but you breed and select for good constitutional vigor. So it's always the healthiest birds on your yard, the active, the ones that feel the good, and look the best, the ones that have nice red faces, things like that. So it's not that hard, really. You just got to have some kind of discipline and some courage not to use those medications.
Yep. And like you said, if they're vigorous and they never get sick, that's the ones that you want to breed back every year. If they get sick,
never get sick. Never get sick.
Never get sick. If you get one to get sick, I never breed a sick bird, ever. If that bird gets sick, I never breed that bird, even if it's something simple. As a chick growing up, if something happens to that bird, it will never reach its full potential anyway.
No,
never.
Mm-mm. And if you're selecting really healthy hens, chances are you're selecting hens with good mitochondrial DNA, and you're going to get that growth and development that you're looking for. Yeah, you're going to see your family improve, each generation if you breed and select in such a way. If you don't, you're always going to be fighting disease. Frank, I have nothing else to talk about, so I guess we should wrap up the show.
We're an hour and 45 minutes, so I didn't even realize it'd been that long. I really hadn't.
It's flying by. So we've always said we want to do hour shows. I don't think we're capable of doing hour shows.
No.
It's just
No.
I'm enjoying like what we're doing now. I'm enjoying the conversation.
It's great.
To tell you the truth, because we're satisfying our need as far as teaching with the Master's Class video series.
Those are great.
Those are good. Those are good.
Me and Kenny actually get to talk about important stuff. Stuff that we can on the live show. That's fun itself, but it's like we're sitting in our kitchen having a conversation pretty much, teaching while people watch. So it's great. It really is. I love them.
Yeah. Okay, you guys, we'll see you guys next week. See you there. Don't miss it.
See you Thursday, guys.
Thanks, Frank.
Thank you, Kenny.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. But don't go away because we've got a great coaching call that you're not going to want to miss. This show is brought to you by the Breeders' Academy, where we will help you to increase your knowledge of breeding, advance your skills as a breeder, and help you to improve the quality and performance of your fowl.
As a member, I'll provide you a roadmap that you will need to create a true family or strain. Starting with a cock from one breeder and a hen from another breeder, no problem. We can help you to turn your flock of hybrid crosses or mongrels into a pure family or strain, and show you how to continually improve that strain each generation. We'll start by showing you how to select your seed fowl and how to turn that seed fowl into a high-quality foundation strain. Our proven breeding programs and specialty courses are designed to take you step by step through the breeding process. And best of all, I'll be there to help you every step of the way.
We urge you to check it out. You have nothing to lose, and you can cancel at any time. You also have a 30-day money-back guarantee. Simply go to www.breedersacademy.com to sign up. Becoming a member is a simple process. You start by selecting your membership level, enter your username, password, and email address. Read and agree to the terms and conditions, then click the PayPal button. Once you have entered your payment information, you will have instant access to the website.
The Breeders' Academy will not only change the way you think about breeding, but improve the way you breed your fowl. What kind of chickens do you raise, by the way?
That's a great question. So I've been playing with game fowl since I was, about 16 when I first started, but just due to work and other life experiences, I have 4 kids, whatever, in and out when I could. But now I've kind of settled in and built the home I hope to end up in. And for the last couple of years, been looking to play with some breeds. So as far as families of fowl, I've had a lot of different hatch strains and things, but never really set up a true breeding program and such. So that's where, learning about your program and stuff really excited me and appealed to me. Is like, I really need to just do this right. Because I do line breeding, son to mother down the lines and vice versa, both sides, to try and keep them straight. But the family I've had around the longest, and I mean, just cutting to the chase, is I've got some pumpkin Holsies. I got actually from a guy out of California, and you may even know him, Larry Carter.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So I have some of his pumpkin Holsies that I got a long time ago. I've kept them around on a family farm. But now I'm really looking to maybe try and set those and kind of convert them a little bit to more what I like and where they want to be and set them as a strain.
The original pumpkin Halseys were considered gingers.
Yeah.
Old English gingers. They just depart a little bit when it comes to, and I'll get to asking about your traits here pretty soon, but they have like really dark eyes. They got like a greenish blue leg, and they have more of the full ginger self-color. Do yours match that at all?
Well, a little bit, let's say. So mine comes straight comb pico, yellow legs, white legs, and then more of that willow color that you've seen, that green. We do get that thrown in them occasionally.
Yeah.
But I would say now with the white and the yellow in them, they seem to throw more yellow and white legs every once in a while. Like I've got an old willow hen out there right now. She was one of my original ones that I got from Larry back in the day. But yeah, so they're good birds. They're a little bit across the board. As far as colors, I mean, they're obviously that pumpkin color. They'll throw a little more white. They'll throw various things. But
yeah, if you can, send me some pictures so I can take a look at them.
Absolutely. Happy to.
Are they coming duck wing or they got a crow wing on them? Do you know?
Define that. I'm a little new to that term.
Okay. If you look at the wing, you'll see that in a duck wing bird, like a silver duck wing or a red or something like that, you'll see a wing bow, a definite wing bow, wing bar, and a wing bay in the wing itself. If you have a crow wing bird, a true ginger would be, they're kind of related to the black-breasted black reds. You'll see a solid color in the whole wing. So would you call it a crow wing or a duck wing?
More of a duck wing.
Okay.
More blending in the wings.
Yeah, the Halsey, they're nice birds and everything, and they took it from the ginger, but they put so much stuff in there. So you're going to...
They have. You can tell.
Yeah, expect a lot of genetic diversity.
And that's a question for you. I mean, as far as like setting those as a strain, I like the look. My preference is I love them when they come out. Small head, peacomb, yellow leg, orange, but almost a little red orange. I don't like the whites and the reds. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do instead. I'd like to kind of develop my own strain from that, because you're right. I found I can get pretty much I don't get any blues or blacks or anything like that, but I get a lot of diversity in color. And
let me pull out, I'm going to show you real quick what a real ginger looks like. Have you seen them before?
Maybe, but yeah, pull it out. I'd love to see it.
Okay, hold on a second. Okay, can you see that?
Oh yeah, perfect.
Okay.
That's great.
Now, it's kind of a crow wing. Now, usually a crow wing bird has a solid color going through, but that's what they typically look like. Does your hens look like that at all?
My hen, like that old hen, looks very much like this hen right here.
Okay. Selecting the right hen can take you in different directions. And I can't wait to see what yours actually look like. How close to this are they, do you think?
So the hen I have one hen that looks very much, it seems like the heads though, it almost looks like they have some black, like a mug or a black head. Maybe that's just the coloring I'm seeing. My heads are more the red, a bright red. But like that hen, yeah, and she's even got willow legs. When Larry sent him, I even called him up and like, hey, is this like a red quill or something?
Well, red quill's the same thing.
Right. This one looks really different than the other hens. So I have one came like this, and all the other ones look like, almost like a hatch hen, that buff color with yellow, white legs. Don't look like this at all.
Okay. Selecting the right hen, and it would be good to see the hens you have, and then tell me what direction you want to go, then I can help you select the right hen to get you there. Because if you have hens like this is going to get you this. Okay. You can see my cursor?
Like yeah.
Okay, good. And then as you can see, this is the proper conformation of body for American games too. So that's kind of what you want to strive towards as well. And another way to look at it, whenever you see like the outline of a bird and it's the silhouette of the bird, the overall shape of the bird, that's what they call type. And that's very important. Without type, you don't have the breed. So you always want to look for type. Conformation is the parts all put together into one, but the type is the total outline of the bird. So keep an eye on those kind of things.
This is exactly like, as far as body types, this is what I want to produce. I like this.
Yeah, I can't wait to see pictures because, Like you were saying, can I create a family from what you have? I believe if you have 2 birds, you can create a family. Now, do the hens match the roosters? That's kind of important, and it'll help you determine where you want to end up, your final result, okay? But as you select, and it doesn't even, in a lot of ways, it doesn't even matter the conformation of body when you're first starting. I'm not going to say it doesn't matter, but what I'm trying to say is you can get away with a lot when you're first starting. If you go on my website, we're on the website right now, and this will blow you away and show you. This is what I started with. And I don't even know what I saw in these birds when I first started. And it was actually an older cock. He was not a young cock when I started. And the hen, you can see where her legs are. They're way out of balance. They're way behind her body. And she didn't have the proper soap. As far as type, she was completely wrong. Him too. This is what they are now. And this is without adding outside blood. This is all through selection over the years. This is my way of showing you that you can start pretty much with anything. I did. If you follow the Founders program, that's going to get you there. As you go, you can stay in touch with me and I can help you along the way, because there are some things you have to consider. Like any program, it's not a one size fits all exactly. You're going to have to tweak it and do some things, but that's the basic roadmap. So when you're first starting, you're going to do a consolidation of the traits, which is usually let me ask you this first. Is the cock and hen that you're starting with, are they related?
No,
okay.
They are not.
This is where this comes in. So basically we're doing an outcross.
Yes.
Understand that that's the way most people have to start. Very seldom is anybody going to get a pure family, a really high quality family, and start from there. Most people are right where you're at. They're going to go and they're going to get a cock from one person or a hen from another, or they might get the pair from the same person, but they're not related, just like what you're dealing with now. It will be important for me to see. I wish I would have had you send me those pictures. It'll let me know what your results are going to be. And that's the nice thing about genetics too, is because it's not just a tool, but it's a guideline, because you can look at the birds and look at the phenotype of those birds and tell right away when you put them together, basically what you're going to get when you're looking at dominant, recessive, and polygenic traits, things like that, and sex-linked traits. That way you'll know what you're going to get and if you should even breed those birds together. Have you bred any yet? You got any offspring on the ground?
I do.
Okay. How old are they?
They were all hatched in end of March.
This year?
Yeah, this year.
Okay, so they're young. We're going to look at them as they develop this year. And and I need to put it in here because there's another step that should go right here, but it's a conditionary step. It's not something you have to do. If I like the cock and hen you're dealing with, either one or the other or both, let's say the offspring develop and they grow up, and they're still not where you want them to be, we may have to do a back cross, meaning when we get to here, we're going to take those offspring and we're going to go to the cock, or we're going to take them to the hen, and we're going to get as much as we can from that next breeding from those birds. From there, we should get some offspring that we can do the fixation of traits stage. It's not exactly, to me, a breeding method, but it's a tool. And it has a purpose. And if you do it properly, you're going to get some great results. And it's almost a necessary stage in creating a strain. I mean, we can go further. There's more to it than that, and you can read it on your own.
Well, let me ask you this question. So obviously with the seed fowl, and again, I've listened to a lot of your things, we can get completely unrelated. I mean, we could do a hatch to a sweater or whatever we want to do. My thought process was, because it's your seed fowl and you're just going to take one rooster and one hen, and where I'm kind of open and not sure what's going to produce, would it be bad to technically say, okay, I'm going to take this same cock and I've only got one hen and she's really old. That hen, the one I showed, it's like the type that you saw, looks like that. She's old. She's not very broody. She doesn't lay a ton of eggs. I don't know if it's her age. She just hasn't been the ideal personality and performance that I want out of her. She looks great. She looks like $1 million. Big spurs. Heck, I had to cut her spurs because, I mean, they were huge. I mean, she really is a pretty bird, but she doesn't have a lot of those characteristics that I think that are important and that we'll want. So my thought was, do I take the rooster that I like, the type I like, and put him on that hen, which is the hen type that we like and may want to follow, but then go ahead and put him on the other one, like a bright yellow-legged, like a roundhead, a yellow-legged roundhead hen or something. And then as seed fowl, literally, because it's just the first mating, we're going to try and produce as many as we can out of the two. Look at all the offspring and say, you know what, from here, I'm going to choose group A or B and then kind of go down that direction. Is that a wrong approach? Is that an okay approach? What's your thoughts there?
No, the whole idea of the seed fowl is to get started, and
Right.
you got to get good fowl on the ground from them. Now, I'm a little concerned with that hen. You say, I know she may be older and everything, but you're saying she's not really broody. That's a concern of mine.
Me too.
It depends how old she is. If she's not laying, I guess you could expect that if that's so. But also, when you're talking about old hen, you're talking about a hen. Let's say, how old do you think she is?
She's 8, I think.
Okay, that's kind of the borderline for me. That's the limit right there. You got to understand that the eggs are just as old as she is. The eggs that she's laying were in her body when she was hatched. So you tend to, once you get up in the upper age and she's already starting to show problems, you're looking at a hen there's a good chance she's going to throw out chicks that are lethargic. They're not going to be as thrifty. They're not going to have the right vigor. They're not going to grow and develop properly. So if you're going to use her, you really need to keep an eye on those things, because when it comes to fertility, if there's a chick in that egg, whether it hatches or not, the cock's done his job. If they're not, then he's failing. Okay, that's his job. Okay, that's not a heritable trait, so that's the good news. Hatchability is a whole different story. Okay,
Right.
if those eggs are fertile and they're not hatching, or the chicks aren't coming as strong as they should, and they're not growing and developing, that's all her. Okay, but when you're dealing with an older hen, that can become a real reality. And when you're starting with seed fowl and you're trying to get your strain off on a good start, to me, that wouldn't be a way to go. When it comes to the seed fowl, you need the bird you're starting with to be as good as it can possibly be on both sides, the cock and the hen. My suggestion is to see what else you got on your farm, or maybe put a little money aside and take some time to find the right hen.
Well, and that's the process. And that's where I'm at. And I guess my question to you also would be, although that was like the photo you did, I think that is a beautiful looking bird, a great standard. Would it be wrong of me to try and want to produce my standard with, I like the body type, but I would love the dark head, but I would love the bright yellow legs, the pea cone. Would it be wrong to try and develop something that's a little bit different, very much in type, but just a few traits different? Is that a bad thing? Should I not be doing that? I mean, I'm like, I just...
You know what? This is what I like about breeding. They're your birds. You can create whatever you want. You get in your mind's eye what you're looking for, and you strive towards that. The only thing you need to be concerned with is, if you want to raise American games, what I just showed you a second ago, they have to have the right conformation of body and type. That's number one, or they're not American games. Without that, they're something else, okay? That they have to have. That's what makes them a good representative of their breed. Okay, if you're going to create a whole different breed, then that's up to you too. But if you want them to be American games, they have to have that. If color is important to you and you do want them to be a certain variety, like let's say the ginger, then it's important that you strive and breed towards that. But you can create your own strain, like let's say the pumpkin Halseys that started out with gingers. He created his own strain from that. Look how well received they are. They're highly sought after. They have been for years. He did that. That's fine. You can decide what color you want them to be, what leg color you want them to be. You want American games, they have to represent American games, and that comes in conformation and type. Now, the only other thing you got to be concerned with is, first of all, you got to kind of decide what direction you want to go when it comes to color, but know that if you're going to get there, you got to have the right birds to do it. If you got the right cock and you like what he's doing, we need to make sure we select the right hen to get you there. Now, will they be different 5 years down the road than what you expected? There's a good chance of that. But in a lot of times, that's what happens. And some breeders, like pumpkin Halseys, Duke Halsey, I'm sure when he first started this, they probably weren't going in the direction he thought they were going to go in. They just turned out this way and he went with it. And then a lot of times when people are creating new strains and new breeds, that's exactly what's going on. They try to push the bird in one way, the bird goes in another, and it's working, and they're able to reproduce it, and it's looking good, and they go with it. So just know that, will they be exactly like you hope? Maybe not. Maybe close. I have no problem with that whatsoever. That's the fun part of breeding.
Right.
Yeah. Just know that when we're talking about color or plumage, you're talking about autosomal genes. You're also talking about dominant recessive genes. Okay. When you're talking about conformation of body, you're talking about polygenic genes. When you're talking about temperament, things like that, you're talking about, you're talking about polygenic genes. And you understand what a polygenic gene is?
Again, they're the ones we can't see or can see, right? Can't see, right?
Usually can't see, except for the conformation of body, you can. It's one of the few traits that you can see that are polygenic. Now, polygenic it takes a lot of years to develop something that has a high intensity, and temperament and gameness is one of those, which can be lost overnight by breeding to the wrong bird. So
Right. Okay. So that makes sense. So as I go through this, I'll just plan on, from that perspective, adding that little extra step in there as we go through the program.
Yeah.
So for that seed fowl then, because I have a little bit of space, would it be bad to put that cock with, again, let's say the ideal hen, a roundhead hen, another hen, 3 of them? I know what's what, breed heavy, which ones I like. Those are the 2 then that I'd actually select out of those for the seed fowl. Or
Okay, so you got, let's say, a number of hens. Let's say just 3 hens, okay?
yeah, 3.
If you're going to do the Founders program, when it comes right down to it and you want to move forward, you've got to pick one of those hens.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So you can breed that cock to these 3 hens and see what you get, and then go, let's say the roundhead hen produces the chicks that you're looking for. That's the direction you go. You get rid of the others. If you decide that you breeding 3 hens to that one cock and you've got all those chicks together and you just want to make a family out of all those birds, you're going to take something that's, I don't want to say pure per se, but something that's going in the right direction. You're mixing up the gene pool pretty good, and now you got mongrels, and then we're going to have to use a different program called a transformation program, which consists of like a grading. Have you ever heard of grading?
Yes.
Like a grading up program?
Sure.
That it would consist of something like that. That would be totally different than what we're doing here.
Okay.
So yeah, if you want to breed that cock to a number of hens, breed them. Again, we're testing the progeny through that breeding and seeing which hen produces the best offspring, gives us what we're looking for, then that's the direction you go in.
Okay. That's good advice. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I want to be sensitive. Just getting to know me a little bit. I'm crazy. My mind's all over the place. Probably a little bit like your wife, as I've listened to her in the podcast.
Well, I will say this, that one of the worst enemies of a breeder, of some breeders, and I've just dealt with one just recently, is not being focused.
Yeah.
I had a breeder on the Breeders Academy, and I could tell by his questions, he was all over the board every other day. And I finally had to stop him and go, hey, what direction do you want to go? What do you want to do? What is it you want to achieve? Because the questions you're asking me, I can tell you're all over the board. You're never going to get anywhere that way. And he goes, well, I want to do this. I want to do that. And I want to do that. And I go, okay, I don't think I'm going to be able to help you with that, because this is not what we do here. We create strains and things like that. And I don't want to just take your money. I mean, I'll answer your questions, everything, but I just don't think you're going to get the results you're looking for. You know, maybe you should leave for a while and then maybe come back later when you have a better idea what you want to do. And then I would see him all over the internet giving people advice on breeding and everything. And I'm like, oh my God, everything he's saying is wrong. You know, I'm like, sometimes I don't like looking around on Facebook because I just get so frustrated, watching and seeing what people are saying. So
you bet.
I just will say that focus is so important. You really need to say, okay, this is where I'm going. I'm going to have the tenacity to go in that direction and make it happen. Yes, I'm going to have to tweak it along the way. Yes, I may have to change directions a little bit, but just try to find focus in all this the best you can.
So let's just say I started with 1 hen. So from the seed fowl. And Kenny, you tell me, I want to be sensitive to your time. I really appreciate this. You're doing me a favor here. So
I'm here for you. Don't worry about it.
well, I feel bad because I have a lot of questions. Hopefully not too deviated from the subject matter, but
well, usually when I get to about an hour and a half, I start wrapping it up because it's not the time I put into it. And I want to make sure we're covering the right subjects. And when you can always call back and we can do another coaching call. Don't ever worry about that. I'm here for you guys, for the members. But when I go to edit a show and I'm looking at a 3-hour show that I got to edit, oh my God.
Oh, wow. Yeah, you want to poke your eyes out. I can imagine.
Oh, sure. Editing is the hardest part of it all. I'm telling you.
I bet. I can't imagine that.
Just try to ask the questions that are the most important right now.
Okay, let's do that.
If we don't get to it, put them on the side, maybe add to that later, and we can always do another coaching call.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
So first question, let's say I pick the hen, pick the cock. I'm going to breed. How many, like when you started your Maximus lines, that initial seed fowl group, how many chicks should I expect, or what's the right number? Because again, if I use an older hen or whatnot, I mean, I might get 25 chicks out of that. I might get if I use a really producing hen, I can get substantially more. So is there a right number? Obviously, as many as you can to be selective out of that mating.
Yeah.
But is there a number?
It's not exactly a number. What I usually tell people is when you're producing chicks to carry the line forward, it's important to hatch as many as you can afford and manage. Because the more chicks you can hatch, the better your selection is going to be.
Right.
And let's say you hatch 100 chicks, but you're going to weed that down for a number of reasons. Some are going to be some standards, some are going to have defects, some aren't going to have the health that you would like. It could be a number of reasons. Or they have the wrong color, wrong conformation. You're most likely going to end up with the top 10%, which is 10 chicks. Not very many. Honestly, that's what you should strive to do. Weed them down to the top 10. You cull the defective, you cull the substandard. Whatever's left after you've culled down and you've selected the top 10, you can sell those. Those should be good fowl. They're just not your high quality fowl. Now, the ones that are going to move your strain forward the most to the next level is what I call the standouts, which usually consist of 1, 2, maybe 3% of the birds that you produce. They're going to overshadow all the other ones, and you're not going to know this until they're at least a year old or so. So the more chicks you can handle, the more chicks that you can raise and manage and afford, the better off you're going to be. So if you're dealing with one hen, you've got to make a choice, because if she's going to hatch her own chicks, good chance you could get 2 clutches, 3 if you're lucky. It's not very many chicks. And it's why I tell people don't, have a lot of different birds. Don't have too many strains, because that's a pen you could use. I made the most progress when I got rid of birds and I concentrated on one family. It opened up a lot of pens. I could have more breeders, produce more chicks, and I could select better. And that's when I made the most progress, is when I did that. That would be my best advice. And if you got one hen, it might behoove you to get an incubator or have other hens hatch her chicks for you, and just have her hatch as many chicks as she can until the end of the breeding season.
Okay.
So you can get as many on the ground as possible.
Well, and then on that note, so once I've hatched those chicks, I mean, typically, everyone, ideal breeding is when they're 2 years old. I mean, at least 12 months. So
I would say at least 18 months.
If it's that seed fowl, okay, yeah. So if I hatch, let's say I hatched in January, this next January, I probably won't want to put them together. We'll need to watch them and continue. It'd actually be the following season that would put them back together. So you're really that from your seed fowl to the next pairing, you kind of have 2 years you got to get through to see how they mature and everything before. So it's from seed to next, there's basically a 2-year process right there in and of itself, correct?
Yeah. So you're breeding, you've produced chicks this year.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You're going to wait till they're 2 years old. Next year, breed those seed fowl again. You might even get a better quality chicks from that. Okay.
Well, that's a good point.
Yeah. And then that way it gives you more birds to play with and everything, and you can watch them develop. Yeah. That can be the hardest part, is those first 2 years, the first 2 or 3 years. It's the hardest part, because the problem with hatching to using young hens, when you're hatching from young parents, what if when they do get older, when they do mature, they don't turn out to be the birds you thought they would be? Now you've got a whole bunch of offspring from them. Okay.
Exactly.
Young hens tend to lay smaller eggs. They tend not to be the mothers that you would hope they would be, that when they mature, they actually be better mothers. Hens that are young, they haven't really proven themselves to be able to survive their environment. It could be weather, it could be diseases. And I mean, there's a lot of things that can go on. So any weakness those birds may have, you just hatched a bunch of chicks carrying those weaknesses. And here's another thing you could do, but be willing to compare to the rest, is if you are impatient. Oh, that's a bad word. I don't want to say it like that.
Well, I might be a little impatient, but I will wait 2 years. I want to do this right. That's why I literally want to map this out on paper, timelines and everything. So I'm going to set it and I'm going to stick to this thing.
Okay.
So
what you could do, and what I tell some people is, say you got some 1-year-olds, you could breed them. Go ahead and breed them and then see what comes out of them. Okay.
Oh, sure.
But really watch them and try not to hatch too many, because like I said, you don't want to be stuck with a whole bunch of birds if those birds turn out not to be good fowl. Okay. So I tell people sometimes go ahead and breed those birds at a younger age and see what you get, and then just be cautious and check them. But that's what I would say. Okay. For me, what I do here, and I know it's, like I said, we're back to what we were talking about. The first 2 or 3 years are the hardest. It's the hardest to get through. But once you get started and you've got a program going, you're going to have your breeders. You'll have your breeders. Then you're going to have the birds that are maybe free ranging or growing and developing. And you don't even give them a thought. They're doing their own thing. And then when they reach 2 years old, they make their way into the brood pen. And like right now, I've got birds, they're looking good. They look fine, but I know that they're not 2 years old and they're doing their thing. And I know next year, but I have plenty of breeders. I'm not hurting for breeders. Even if you wait till the birds are a good 2 years old, that gives you 5 or 6 years to breed her to fulfill that program. That's plenty.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
8 years is, I used to say 6 years. And if I see any of the programs in my website that said 6 years, because that's what I used to say, I'll change it. But I'm starting to say 8 because I'm seeing, like in my birds, I'm seeing that I'm still getting good quality birds from my 7 and 8 year olds. 6 years old seemed kind of, especially if I wanted to line breed that hen, 6 years old was kind of pushing it. I needed one more year. And I was still getting good quality from those hens. After 8 years old, I just don't do it. I don't breed them after that. That make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes great sense.
Yeah.
Thank you. How many pens, just out of curiosity, for your Maximus line? I mean, like right now, how many pens do you guys keep? I mean, your big farm, do you guys have 200 pens out there?
No, I don't carry that many pens. But that's not all just for the Maximus line. I have the Maximus line. I have the Tecumseh line, which is a smaller family. I have the Black Pearls, which are a black-breasted black-red, the crow-winged bird, which is a smaller family. I don't know if I can call them a family yet. I call them the Sangreal line, and it's something I'm working with. It's kind of like my experimental line. Matter of fact, just the other day, I was telling my wife, I go, should I get rid of those extra families and just stay with the Maximus line? Because I am losing some pens. I am, I'm doing okay. I'm getting all my best brood hens bred, and I'm getting chicks from them. That's been good. So I'm not suffering exactly. But I'll tell you what I get from those other birds is, for me, and I think it's important, and I think it helps you too, is I'm learning from them. I'm flexing my breeding muscles. There are different breeding programs I'm using with those than I am for the Maximus line. So that's why I do it. I usually tell people 1 strain is best, 2, 3 at the most. Anything after, you're just diluting your efforts and you're going to make it difficult, and it's going to become a headache.
Cool. Well, and if I use one of those outcrosses, I guess that's something I'm willing to deal with and plan on dealing with, but
that's when you'd use the Founders Program. You're starting a family with 2 birds that are basically unrelated.
Correct.
That's why this works. This is the program most people need to use. Very seldom are they able to go to a breeder and get a pure family. If you got what you're looking for and the next breeding, the offspring are all nice and uniform and consistent, that's the key. That's the telltale sign that you're on the right track when the offspring come uniform and consistent. If you're getting a lot of variation, a lot of genetic diversity with the offspring, you're getting different sizes, different colors, different everything, then you need to, again, pick the best birds that are going to take you in the direction you're hoping to go to. They got to understand how the program works, and they got to understand the fowl that they're breeding.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. I mean, it really is going to be, there's so many variables that come into play.
Yeah. That's what I like about the Breeders' Academy. I'm able to work with you guys as we go.
Well, I'll tell you what, I signed up last, Sunday, whatever it was, Sunday night, something like that. And I've been in it every day. It's been great. I love the podcast.
Oh, good.
The content has been fabulous. I love looking at, because again, I've had grays and all these different families of birds. Well, speaking of that was one suggestion, just a simple suggestion. In your charts and stuff, you have the leg colors, how if you cross it and whatever, this is what you get, or that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
What about, is there a way to kind of predict that using the charts with color? Like if you cross a hatch on a gray, all the pullets will be X and all the snags will be Y.
Yeah.
I was curious because I love that chart. I was like, that is cool. Now I know what legs to expect. And if I get something different, then they definitely know these are not pure here because it's showing something else coming out of the mix.
Right. I'll tell you right now, but check out the program. Let me get there. If you go to the program section, you'll definitely want to read this. Dominance right here.
Yeah.
And quantitative traits is another good one. Okay.
Okay.
You got to understand that some colors are dominant and some are recessive. And the ones we deal with the most are red and silver. And then like the black-breasted black reds, they have the red in them and things like that. Silver, we know silver is dominant over red. So if you've got a pure homozygous silver bird and you breed it to a red, if he's showing red, he's already homozygous because he's recessive. you're going to get offspring that are all silver. But now they're heterozygous. They're not pure silver. They're impure. So they're going to carry that red gene. They're going to look silver and everything, so that when you go to breed them, and if you bred them, to other silvers or with each other, you're going to see a variation of red and silver. We're able to, like leg color, we're able to determine the feather color too through dominant and recessive genes. We know that certain colors are dominant and some are recessive.
Interesting.
Blue is probably the most, when we talk about genetics, there's no real, what they call blending. People say, it's all about the family and everything. Well, no, genetics means it's despite the family, it's the genes that they carry. That gene is the same in any other bird. And so we need to decide from there where we're going to go. But if you look at like blues, it's the only real true blending that we're dealing with. Because when you breed like a black and white, dominant to a recessive white, you're going to get a gray color. That's blue. But then when you breed blue to blue, not all the offspring are going to be blue. You're going to get splash. You're going to get black, white. You're going to, in some cases, get red. It's all over the board. So you can never breed blue true. It's the most frustrating color there is, and I love the blues,
Me too. I had a family of mugs. So some coal miner mugs. That's exactly my situation. I mean,
that's a black-breasted, black-red family.
Yeah.
That someone added blue to them.
Right.
And once you get blue in there, you can never get them out.
No, and I just can't predict it no matter what I do.
Yeah.
So it didn't even matter. I even thought my splash on a splash cock on a splash hen would throw splashes, but it threw some splashes, but not all splashes. So it was weird.
I'll show you. I got the chart right here. Matter of fact, I just put blues in here. There's the blues right there. Splash and splash actually does create 100% splash.
I saw that actually in your chart, and I was like, mine didn't do that. That's what was weird. And so I'm like, maybe there's something off with it, or I don't know, because I still have those mugs, and my favorite are the splashes. So I was like, sweet. I'm just gonna put splash on the splash, and I'll just breed a family of basically whites, with.
What did you get?
I got a black, some blacks. I actually got more blacks and more like dark blues than I got splash.
You sure she wasn't bred to another rooster too and all that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Single mated, pen together. I mean,
yeah,
it was weird. I'm going to try it again this year just because I still have them, and I only kept the splash because I like that color. And I was just trying to produce more, but all the ones I bred this year, my pen is just full of mostly blacks and dark blues, and I got one splash out of that mix. It was the weirdest thing ever.
My mentor calls it a haywire gene because you never know what you're going to get, and
right.
This chart here should be the typical what you should expect, basically. And
the guy told me that. He told me if I breed my splash on the splash, because I told him originally when I was reaching out to Richard and Zeke over there, I was like, I just want the white ones, really. He's like, well, just put those two together and you'll breed mostly those. And I was like, okay. But I've had the weirdest luck. I don't know. I'm special, I guess, in a weird way. I believe that to be true. I don't know what's going on with the hen or something. Maybe she's not really splash. Maybe she's spangled and not a splash. So I don't know.
Yeah, I'd have to see the feathering because spangled is a lot different than splash. But
right, spangled's the white on the tip versus the white with black in it.
There could be something else in there too.
There could. And maybe that's the thing. Maybe there is an underlying deal that creates it.
And that's a problem with a lot of our fowl these days. There's so much genetic diversity. Everybody's crossing everything. They don't know what they have anymore.
And frankly, that's why I reached out, because I've been, everything you've said, I've made all those mistakes. I brought in fowl from all the guys. I've tried all sorts of things. And I don't know. Like you, I've learned that. I've been playing with it, but I'm like, okay, I'm kind of done doing all this. I'm going to set my own. I'm going to set it not just for type, like color type body. I'm just not going to do anything more. I'm going to pick a couple that I like and then just focus. And I want to breed these ginger or pumpkin colored birds. And I want them to look like these. Yeah. And that's where I'm going to focus on. This program got me excited. And just because I've tried so many of these things, and as I go through it, it's almost like you're confirming all the things I've tried through trial and error and failed. And I'm like, yeah, I can relate to that. Messed that one up. So.
I've got some big time cockers in here that don't, they're kind of incognito and everything. And that's what they've been telling me too, is that some of it they've known, some of it I've confirmed what they thought, and some of them I've opened their eyes about some things, it's kind of all, enough for them to stay in the programs. I'm flattered that they're here.
Yeah. I think your program's great and I appreciate your time and everything. This This is fantastic. You've addressed all my initial questions, but I can promise you I will have a lot more. And if you're ever in Utah, or you guys are passing around, travel, doing shows, open invitation to come to my place and hang out.
Okay. Sure.
Hang with the family and check out the birds, any of that, if you guys are out and about. So,
It's funny. If my wife was on this podcast with us right now, she'd say, hey, let's move to Utah. She wants to move out of California so bad that she's looking for anywhere. And I'm like, I want to move where there's something to do. I want to move somewhere where the weather's good. I mean, I've got my criteria. I don't want to just move away. I want to move to a really good spot because San Diego, I mean, we have high taxes and we have our problems here and everything, but the weather's so good and there's so much to do here.
Kenny, I really thank you and I love the program. I'll continue to hammer it. I'm sure I'll have more questions. So I hope it's okay. I'll reach out via email or through the chat system.
Yeah.
Trust me, I can come up with a million questions. I could go for days on this.
Yeah, that's fine. Just make a list. And we can set up another coaching call. I love doing these coaching calls. It gives me a chance to get to know you guys, and get to know my members. And I've actually become friends with a lot of these members just because of the coaching calls,
Yeah, you bet.
Yeah.
Well, and it's so helpful because there's when you really think about it, there's not a whole lot of people you can talk about this stuff to that one even care. Or they're like, most people look at me like, you're into chickens? Yeah, I like raising chickens. They're like, wow, that's weird.
Well, I can talk about breeding all day long. I love the breeding side of it. I like, breeding them, seeing what I get, improving them, seeing how they develop, and I've been helping people do this for years. This website's a dream come true for me.
It's great. It's appreciated. I mean, we needed it. I needed it. So thank you.
That's cool. I never want you to be confused or frustrated.
Yeah.
So if you get to that point, reach out as soon as possible. I'll make sure you get the answers you need.
Well, you absolutely fixed me today because my plan and my little breeding program I was writing out was I was going.
When you read the Founders Program, did you read the actual program or just the Quick Start Guide?
No, I was in the program.
Since you're going to be there soon, you need to know exactly what to expect and understand it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And as far as color, throwing ginger, round, any other suggestions? I mean, I could put that pumpkin on a white hackle. Obviously, I have other pumpkins, which I'm going to try, or a round head. Any other thoughts that you think could, if I want to really perpetuate the ginger color, but again, have the traits that I need to continue to win?
Perpetuate the ginger color. You want to, well, we're talking about the red quills too. We're talking about the Holsies. I need to see the bird you got.
Okay, I'll get you some pictures.
If we're going to try to stay with the red quill, then we need to stay with a crow-wing bird. You really don't want to mix your color groups, like crow-wing with duck-wing or duck-wing with self-colors, things like that. You really want to stay within your group because you can do a lot within that group. I need to see your birds, so send me some pictures, but
I'll get you some pictures and maybe we can chat from there. Well, thank you again. Definitely, you've got a great thing going. I'd be happy to help you guys continue to succeed and make it happen.
Okay.
So thank you.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Take care, Kenny.
Okay, thank you. See you later.
Bye-bye.
Okay, thanks for listening.
Yes, thank you again for joining us on the Bred to Perfection podcast show. This show was brought to you by the Breeders Academy, where by becoming a member, you can increase your knowledge of breeding, advance your skills as a breeder, and take you and your fowl to the next level.
We can also show you how to create a strain from hybrid crosses or mongrel flocks, and help you to create, maintain, and improve your present strains. We urge you to check it out. You have nothing to lose, and you can cancel anytime. You also have a 30-day money-back guarantee.
To join us at the Breeders Academy membership website, go to www.breedersacademy.com. To become a member is a very simple process. You start by clicking on the registration button and selecting your membership level. Enter your username and password and email address. Read and agree to the terms and conditions, and click the PayPal button. Once you enter your payment information, you will have instant access to the website.
Best of all, I'll be there to help you every step of the way.
While you're checking out the Breeders Academy, make sure to sign up for our newsletter, The Breeders Bulletin. We provide a lot of free bonus materials and some great information that will take you and your fowl to the next level. Also, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Kenny Troiano, and click on the bell so that you are notified of all future podcast episodes and videos. You can find our show, Bred to Perfection, on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Overcast, Luminary, and iHeartRadio, or wherever you find your favorite podcast shows. Well, that's it for now.
We hope you join us next time for another episode of Bred to Perfection. We'll see you later.
Bye.
If you are enjoying the show and would like to learn more, I encourage you to join me at the Breeders' Academy. By becoming a member, I can help you to achieve the competitive advantage.
Can you hear that? That's my stomach growling here.
No, I didn't hear that. Okay, let's go.
You've worked me long enough. I am leaving you.